Hey guys, tonight we're doing something uncomfortably authentic. We're heading back to the 1800s, dead of winter, frost on the windows, your breath puffing white in your own kitchen, to explore what it was really like to wash clothes when the temperature dropped and everything else just stopped. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this, but on the off chance you make it through without frostbite or emotional trauma, you'll at least know why your ancestors look so tired in those old tintypes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and what time it is where you're watching. I want to know who else is half asleep in their blanket cocoon while imagining their hands submerged in ice water. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's just before sunrise and you're already up. Not because you're a morning person, no one is when it's 14 degrees Fahrenheit in your own house, but because laundry day in the 1800s waits for no one. You rise to darkness and the unmistakable sound of the wind creaking through ill-fitted shutters. There's no central heating. There's barely insulation. Your feet touch the floor and it's like stepping into a snowbank. You wrap a shawl over your dress, double up your socks, and shove your aching hands into woolen mittens still damp from yesterday's chores. Outside, the ground is stiff with frozen mud. Inside, it's only slightly warmer. Laundry in winter isn't some romantic Little House moment. It's a forced march against the physics, time, and your own will to live. First, you assess the pile. The basket is overflowing with everything from threadbare petticoats to wool stockings that smell like wet sheep. A week's worth of grime, maybe two. Honestly, you stop counting after the holiday baking rush. There are mystery stains, burn marks, a pair of drawers that got dipped in butter somehow. It's not even worth sorting. You'll just go by colour and prayer. Before any washing can begin, you need water. And not just a pitcher or two. We're talking vats, wash tubs, multiple buckets for boiling, rinsing and wringing. This means a trek to the well, where the rope pulley is frozen stiff and the bucket handle bites like a snake. The first crank is a test of strength and stubbornness. You throw your entire weight into it, hear the groan of dry rope sliding over iced wood. The bucket lowers with glacial speed. The water is slushy and slick, rimmed with ice. You haul it up by inches, arms shaking, shoulders already sore, hands screaming through the mittens. You repeat this process 5 or 6 more times, till your shoulders feel like raw beef and you're balancing a dangerous slosh of frigid water back toward the house. Inside, the stove has been burning low overnight, but it's still not warm enough to thaw your buckets, let alone your fingers. You load the big copper boiler and begin to feed the fire underneath. It will take nearly an hour to get the water hot enough to boil, and this is just the warm water stage. You haven't even looked at the soap yet. The soap. Let's talk about that. It's homemade, naturally. A byproduct of pig slaughter and fireplace ash. You rendered the fat yourself last fall, probably gagging through the whole process, and mixed it with lye in a treacherous gamble that might have made decent cleaner, or permanent chemical burns. This stuff doesn't foam. It bites. Touch it too long and it'll eat your skin. It smells like a bad marriage between bacon grease and a miner's armpit. You chip off a chunk and drop it into the boiling water like a toxic bath bomb, hoping it softens enough to do its job. Outside, the sky is lightening to a dim steel grey. Frost still coats the ground. A neighbour trudges past with a wheelbarrow full of kindling, and you give each other that dead-eyed look of shared suffering. No one talks much on wash day. What would you even say? Hope you don't freeze solid? May your bloomers dry before the next storm? Morale is not high. By now the kitchen is steamy with smoke and vapour. Your hair damp with condensation. The stove's crackling but only warms a 3-foot radius. You brace yourself, lift the first garment, an underskirt that feels like a wet horse blanket, and dunk it into the hot water. Steam hisses up. The lye soap fizzes. You grab the washboard, made of rough wood and tin, and begin the rhythmic scraping that will become your entire life for the next 4 to 6 hours. Your knuckles bleed within minutes. Your knees ache on the hard floor. You scrub until you're not even sure you're removing stains or just sanding them deeper into the fabric. Your breath fogs the air in little clouds as you move from one soaked piece to another, shifting between the boiling vat, the rinse basin, and a grim little pile that might need a second round. There's no machine to help you. No spinner, no agitator. Just you, a slab of metal, and the sneaking suspicion that dirt is winning. A lot of people think women back then were delicate. They clearly never watched someone try to wring out a soaking wool blanket with bare hands. Your palms burn, your shoulders are jelly, and this is only the beginning. Later comes drying, if you can call it that, and the grim battle with clothespins, wind, and time. Historically speaking, it's worth noting that laundry was one of the most dangerous domestic chores, not because of the water or soap, but because of the sheer physical exhaustion it demanded. Some women passed out during it, some slipped on frozen floors and cracked ribs or worse. There's even record of women collapsing from sheer dehydration after standing too close to boiling pots for too long. But hey, no one dies in this episode. Yet. And here's the quirky bit. Some families believe that if you washed clothes between Christmas and New Year's, it would wash someone out of the family. As in, kill them. So if it's late December in our little timeline, you might just be gambling with someone's life over a pair of dirty drawers. Meanwhile, scholars are still debating whether this level of domestic labour counts as part of the hidden economy. You know, the unpaid backbone of survival that historians are only now taking seriously. You don't get wages, you don't get days off, but your work, this endless scrubbing, literally keeps the household from collapsing into filth, disease and public shame. You pause, flex your aching hands and look out the window. The sun has barely cleared the horizon, but you've already lived a full day. And there are 29 more sections to go. The fire hisses behind you as the boiler simmers, and your soaked apron clings to your front like a second heavier skin. Your arms are already beginning to ache from the first round of wringing and scrubbing, but there's no time to linger. Because now comes the part that feels more like a punishment than a chore, fetching more water. Of course the first round wasn't enough. Laundry in the 1800s is a marathon of logistics, and right now you're just warming up. You throw on your coat, which is stiff with old smoke and faintly scorched along the hem, grab your bucket, and step outside into what can only be described as a slap across the face from Mother Nature. The wind is sharper now, like it's had its coffee and decided to attack. You trudge back toward the well, boots crunching over hard-packed snow, the bucket swinging like a taunt at your side. This time the rope is even stiffer, and the handle actually splinters a little when you force it to move. The bucket groans downward again. You can't feel your fingers, you can't feel your nose, but somehow in this face-waking winter nightmare, you still feel your bladder, and it's giving you bad news. Too bad. Bathroom breaks don't happen mid-haul. Water finally retrieved, you stagger back inside, where the kitchen now smells like a stew of wet wool, wood smoke and sharp lye. The steam thickens the air into something close to soup, and your lungs complain with every breath. You refill the boiler, shuffle wet clothes into the rinse basin, and brace yourself for round 2. The wet garments in the tub now feel less like clothes and more like creatures. Sloppy, frozen creatures with the weight of grudges. You try to keep up a rhythm, scrub dunk ring dump. There's a hypnotic quality to it. Your mind starts to wander to anything else. Maybe a mental letter to your future self. Never complain about dishwashing again. Or maybe a bitter laugh imagining future people who throw things into a magical box, press a button, and then just walk away. Joke's on you though. You will never meet those people. You slap another petticoat onto the washboard and begin the merciless scrubbing. It's an old one, stained from years of wear and just heavy enough to feel like a soaked quilt. You don't know what's worse, the hot water, which scalds your fingertips through thinning gloves, or the rinse basin, where the icy water slices into your skin like 1,000 tiny knives. You try to alternate, one in the hot, one in the cold, but your body is not fooled. Your fingers are red, raw and twitching, the real kicker. The laundry isn't even clean yet. Not really. Maybe it smells less like goats and more like smouldering goats, but nothing in this era smells fresh. There's no floral detergent, no fabric softener. At best, your clothes stop being a health hazard and start resembling something you could wear to church without inciting whispered commentary. And then comes the dreaded realization. You have to go outside again. It's time to start hanging things. The drying line is out back, strung between 2 warped posts and partially sagging under last week's storm ice. You gather the first armed load of clothes, shoving pins into your apron pocket. They are made of wood and metal, and they're cold enough to sear your skin. The clothes are still dripping, still steaming. You step outside. The wind immediately tries to take everything from you, your breath, your skirt, your dignity. You wrestle with a flannel nightshirt that slaps you in the face like it's angry to be clean. Pinning it to the line takes several tries. Your fingers are too numb to grip properly, and the pins themselves feel like they're mocking you. One snaps in half. You don't even curse, you just sigh and reach for another. Every movement outside is a dance between balance and frustration. The ground is slick with ice. The clothes are getting stiffer as you work. You pin up drawers and petticoats, blouses and stockings, watching them harden in the wind. Within minutes, they're freeze-drying into shapes that look vaguely haunted, spectres of domestic labour hanging like warning signs to passing travellers. Beware, this woman does not know warmth. There's a myth that frozen clothes dry faster. Technically true if you count sublimation, when ice turns directly into vapour without melting, but out here you just call it freezing your regrets into linen. You reach for the next garment, a child's frock, and remember that the kids are inside, huddled near the stove, probably whispering about your transformation from mother into swamp witch of the frost. They're not wrong. You do mutter to yourself more during laundry. Historically, people didn't even do full laundry every week in winter. It was too hard, too cold, too dangerous. Many rural households saved wash day for when absolutely necessary, and would just brush off garments, air them out in the cold, or spot clean the worst areas with snow or vinegar. Entire communities understood that visible stains were less embarrassing than dying of exposure trying to remove them. But your family? They are picky. Someone had the nerve to say, "I don't have any clean drawers left." And here we are. There's a fringe belief in some regions that hanging wet clothes in sub-zero air actually cleanses the spirit. That's a bold take, considering the only spirits you're sensing are the ones whispering, "Move to Florida." But hey, if freezing your flannels can spiritually purify your family, maybe this is a bonus round. You return to the house again, cheeks stinging and breath shallow. The stove has burned low, and now you have to split more wood, of course. Because winter laundry isn't just one task. It's a cascade of chores that feed each other like miserable nesting dolls. You grab the axe, head back out, and find the kindling pile half frozen. Fantastic. Later, as the sun starts to dip and the sky turns peach and ash grey, you look out the window at your work. The laundry line is sagging under weighty ice-laced garments, like a parade of sleeping ghosts. Inside, every part of you aches. Your skin burns from cold and heat in alternating pulses. Your tea is long cold. The floor is damp from spilled rinse water, and you've still got half a basket left to go. There's an open debate among historians about whether the brutal reality of chores like winter washing contributed to the high rate of depression in rural 19th century women. Some argue it was just the norm, part of the rhythm of pioneer life. Others suggest that the never-ending, body-breaking nature of these tasks slowly wore people down, emotionally and physically, until even joy became a memory wrapped in a flannel underskirt. You rest your forehead on the doorframe. Outside, the wind howls like it's laughing. And somehow, it's still only Monday. The firewood crackles half-heartedly in the stove, and your fingers finally begin to regain some sensation, just enough to feel the sting of a dozen tiny cuts across your knuckles. Blisters already forming. Steam still rolls from the boiling pot like some haunted soup of sweat, soap, and slow despair. You sit for half a second on the worn stool next to the wash tub, shoulders slumped, eyes watering, not from emotion, but from the acrid lye fumes still thick in the air. And just when your body dares to relax, you remember the linens. You groan, loudly, unapologetically. Because linens are the worst. They're massive. They're heavy. They hold onto water like grudges. You drag the first of them into your lap. A tablecloth so stiff with old wine and grease stains it might actually qualify as a weapon. It's the size of a picnic blanket and smells faintly like mutton stew. You heave it into the rinse basin and immediately regret it. The splash soaks your front. Again, and ice-cold water spills onto the floorboards, pooling under your boots. You begin scrubbing. It's no longer a technique. It's just raw aggression. You fold the cloth, slam it against the washboard, fold again, slam, rub, until your wrists start to scream. Your body becomes a sort of metronome of pain and movement. Back and forth. Dunk and ring. It's not graceful, it's not delicate. It's survival through friction. Meanwhile, the children, still huddled by the stove, have gotten suspiciously quiet. You don't turn around. You don't want to know what they're doing. One time during laundry, they tried to help by feeding your only rag towel to the fire to make more steam. You have never truly recovered from that. The rinse water by now has turned into something you could bottle and sell to witches. Floating flecks of who knows what swirl in the murk. The colour is a muted brown-green. You know you should change it, but you also know that involves another trip outside for more water. And honestly, no. Just no. The next few linens will be rinsed, in this stew of old soap and despair. You wrestle with another sheet, this one dingier than the first. A faint, ghostly imprint of a shoe remains in the middle, a reminder of that time your youngest used it as a sled. You smile grimly. One day you'll tell that story with laughter. Today is not that day. Let's take a historical pause here. Not all laundry days in the 1800s looked quite the same. Urban women sometimes had access to communal washhouses, if they could afford the fee and didn't mind sharing water with strangers. But out here, in a rural homestead or a working-class household, everything is DIY. No laundress, no maid, just you. And if you're lucky, another pair of freezing hands. If you're unlucky, well, welcome to the club. And the fire. Oh, the fire. You have to tend it constantly, feeding it logs so the water doesn't drop below boiling. It's like having a toddler with a death wish, demanding, temperamental, and fully capable of setting the house on fire if you're not watching. One eye on the flames, one eye on the boiling tear, and one ear tuned to the terrifying silence behind you where the children are definitely building a fort out of semi-dry underthings. Back at the line, the wind has picked up. You peek outside and sigh. The first round of clothes now have a fine dusting of snow on them. Beautiful, in a soul-destroying kind of way. They've gone stiff as slate. One stocking sticks out sideways, caught mid-flap and frozen into a defiant pose like it's flipping you off. You go back to wringing. Your upper arms tremble under the weight of a thick, wet, quilted skirt that's not even halfway dry. If this were summer, it'd dry in a few hours under the sun. But this? This is a waiting game where time and temperature do not care about your need for clean drawers. Fringe fact time. In some particularly frozen parts of the northern US and Canada, people developed the habit of snap-drying laundry. The idea was to take a soaking shirt or dress, twist it tight, and then whip it through the air, flinging off excess water before it had a chance to freeze. Was it effective? Debatable. Was it dangerous? Absolutely. Flying chunks of ice could and did bruise the shins of countless unsuspecting housewives. You give it a try. The petticoat spins once, then clonks you on the knee so hard you nearly cry. Okay, lesson learned. At this point your hands are trembling. You glance at the clock, or rather, the crooked little wall calendar with a drawing of a chicken and the dates circled in pencil. It's still mid-morning, that can't be right. You feel like you've lived an entire week since dawn, your back aches. Your face is damp with a mix of sweat and steam. And yet somehow, the laundry pile still towers like a silent monument to your inadequacy. There's a saying among old-time washerwomen, as soon as it's clean someone will wear it into the dirt. Which is cute, until you realise your husband is probably out chopping wood in the same shirt you just washed last week, wiping his axe on the hem, and your youngest probably dropped her only remaining clean apron in the snow again. Laundry isn't a chore, it's a loop. An endless, soggy loop of effort and futility. And in case you were wondering, no, there's no reward at the end. No hot bath, no cosy chair and cup of cocoa. Just dinner to cook, children to corral, and more clothes to rotate onto the line. Maybe if you're lucky, no more snow will fall before everything finishes freezing into the shape of something vaguely wearable. There's an ongoing scholarly debate over whether winter laundry days actually contributed to long-term joint damage. Arthritis was incredibly common among older women in the 1800s, especially in the fingers, wrists and shoulders. But was it age? Or was it years of scrubbing, wringing and freezing their extremities while washing 6-person households in sub-zero temperatures? You lean back, stretch your spine until it cracks, and let your eyes flutter shut for just a second. The boiler bubbles behind you. The floor is damp and cold beneath your shoes. Your whole body hums with fatigue, like a violin left too long in the attic. You don't have time for this moment, but you steal it anyway, because in 5 minutes that fire will need more wood. The water will need changing, and someone will come running in with a soiled kerchief claiming they forgot it in their pocket. And laundry day will begin again. The fire sputters low, like it's trying to excuse itself from the madness. You poke at the embers with a rusted iron stick, your gloves soggy and useless, steam rising from every angle like you're standing inside a giant teacup of suffering. The rinse tub sloshes mournfully beside you, filled with greyish water that's too cold to touch and too dirty to ignore. You know what has to happen next. It's time to heat a fresh batch again, and you're all out of kindling. So you do what anyone in your position would do. You march outside with the dead-eyed determination of a woman on the edge. The woodpile is halfway crusted with snow, the logs half frozen and too green. You curse them with your eyes. Chopping's out of the question right now. Your arms are already limp noodles, so you scrape together what's dry, what isn't icy, and what might burn if you just stare at it hard enough. One log crumbles as you lift it. Great. Now your mittens smell like mouldy cedar. Back inside, you toss the usable pieces into the firebox and coax the flames back to life, muttering deals with the devil under your breath. When the fire finally catches and the first bubbles return to the boiler, you let out a noise that's somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. It's short-lived. You still have towels to dry. If you've never laundered a towel by hand in winter, it's hard to describe. Imagine soaking a wool blanket in cold glue, rolling it into a tube, and then trying to crush it into submission using only your biceps and the crushing weight of generational trauma. They never get clean enough, never dry fast enough, and they hang on the line like defeated warriors, frozen and flapping weakly in the wind. And of course, someone has the gall to come into the kitchen and ask if there's any hot water left for washing up. You stare at them like they've just asked you to climb Everest in bare feet. Hot water? You are the hot water. Every drop of it has been summoned with sweat and firewood. You smile politely and tell them to wait their turn, because if they try to scoop even a ladleful from your laundry pot, you might actually combust. You dunk the first towel in and immediately regret it. The fabric absorbs boiling water like a sponge, doubling in weight and threatening to pull you in with it. It's a two-handed operation, this thing. You wrestle it onto the washboard and begin to scrub with the aggressive determination of someone trying to erase a mistake from the universe. You don't know what's on this towel, grease, ink, blood, and don't ask, but it's not going willingly. Fun historical fact. By the mid-1800s, some households had begun using washing machines. Don't get excited. These were wooden drums turned by hand cranks, often more trouble than they were worth. You'd spend 15 minutes just getting the lid off and another 30 turning the crank before realising your clothes were just spinning in cold water. One popular model was affectionately known as the doll bear, which sounds like something that injures you in a cartoon. Most women abandoned the machines after one winter of trying to operate a frozen crank with purple fingers, so you sensibly never trusted such gadgets. Back to the washboard. Scrub, rinse, wring, rinse again. The towel remains damp but marginally cleaner. You pin it to your already overloaded line, where it immediately catches the wind and flaps like a protest banner. Another towel, another minor injury to your knuckles. You're pretty sure you've lost the ability to bend your right index finger. It stays straight even when you try to curl it, as if declaring independence from this entire operation. Fine. Who needs 10 fingers when you have raw, bitter determination? There's a story your grandmother used to tell, about a neighbour who froze her fingers solid while scrubbing sheets during a snowstorm. She didn't notice until she tried to wring the sheets and the skin tore like wet parchment. They wrapped her hands in lamb fat and prayer, but she lost 2 fingers anyway. Your grandmother always ended the story with a shrug. She was back at the washtub 3 weeks later. What else could she do? That part sticks with you. The children come in again, laughing this time, and you can't help but smile, even as you squeeze freezing water from another towel with your mutilated mitts. They tiptoe around the puddles on the floor, noses pink, tracking in a fresh layer of slush. Someone drops a mitten. Another asks for bread. You nod, half listening, gaze fixed on the mess of fabric and effort before you. The laundry isn't done, but neither are you. There's something gritty about this kind of work. Not noble, not beautiful, just real. You can't fake your way through laundry, you can't shortcut it. You can't outsource it unless you've got silver spoons and hired help, which you don't, so you keep scrubbing, you keep rinsing, you keep wringing out piece after piece until the skin between your thumb and forefinger feels like paper. Quirky fact for the night. In some households, people used to toss pine needles or lavender sprigs into the rinse tub to bless the clothing with a cleaner scent. It worked marginally well, until the bits clogged your drain or turned your underthings green. You tried it once. You still find pine needles in the hem of your holiday tablecloth. Outside, the sun is dipping lower, turning the sky a strange mix of brass and pewter. The clothesline creaks. A sheet has frozen solid and now ripples in the wind like a medieval banner. You wonder, briefly, what would happen if you just left everything there overnight? Let it freeze solid and wait for a thaw. But you already know what would happen. Tomorrow, everything will be twice as stiff, twice as cold, and twice as hard to peel off the line. A debate still lingers in scholarly circles, whether laundry in the 1800s was more a ritual of social control or just an unfortunate necessity. Some argue it was designed to keep women busy, isolated, and too tired to think about revolution. Others say it was simply survival, a grim universal task that had to be done if you didn't want to die surrounded by lice and stink. Honestly, you don't care, you just want these towels dry before midnight. You crouch down, reach for the last one, and feel your knees pop in protest. The towel is damp, yellowed, and smells vaguely like last month's stew. You pause for a moment just yet holding it. Inhale, exhale, then dunk, scrub, rinse, wring, pin, done. Almost, the rhythm is starting to hollow you out. Scrub, rinse, wring, hang, scrub, rinse, wring, hang. It echoes through your bones now, muscle memory layered over actual memory, stitched into your spine like a cursed melody. The washtub sloshes, your wrists throb. You're starting to dream of soap suds even with your eyes open. The kitchen smells like scorched wool, boiled grime and effort, and somewhere deep inside your soul is beginning to consider escape by any means necessary. Outside the sun is fading toward a slate-coloured dusk, and the wind is picking up again, rattling the windows like a drunk ghost. Half the laundry is still on the line, frozen stiff into awkward shapes that vaguely resemble human bodies. The effect is mildly terrifying if you squint at it in the twilight. Parade of frozen garments, shirts standing with arms outstretched, trousers bent at unnatural angles, waiting for the sun that won't come. You don't have time to be creeped out. There are socks, tiny malicious tubes of cloth that hold dirt like secrets and multiply behind your back. Somehow, there are always more. You pick up a handful, all stiff with old sweat, soot and winter muck, and toss them into the hot basin. The boiling water hisses, the soap scum clings to your sleeves, and you sigh with the deep weariness of a person betrayed by footwear. You know from experience, if you don't scrub these socks like your life depends on it, hold them. They'll come out just as smelly as they went in. You take one, grip it with both hands, and start working it over the washboard like you're wringing out a snake. It bubbles and foams, but the fabric stays stiff and stubborn, holding the scent of damp earth and foot like a threat. You scrub harder, your fingernails tearing slightly, your breath fogging in front of you. The socks multiply, they always do. Here's a historical gem to distract you from your descent into sock-related madness. In some communities, people believed that if you dropped a sock while hanging laundry and it landed toe up, it meant company was coming. Toe down meant bad luck. Honestly, in your current state, either way, you'd probably just kick the sock into the snow and call it a day. Company or no, there's no spare tea and certainly no dry sitting room. The strange thing is, though, as horrible as all of this is, and let's not kid ourselves, it's objectively horrible. There's a kind of meditative trance that settles over you after hour 6. You don't even feel the cold anymore. You just move, scrub, twist, breathe. You start to hum maybe, or mutter, or whisper curses at the socks, but it's all part of the rhythm now. You've left the world of comfort and entered the sacred realm of the washboard temple. There is only soap, there is only water, there is only you, and this ever-growing mountain of cursed, foot-shaped fabric. The children are in the corner again, this time stacking half-dry garments into laundry forts, and you let them. If they're quiet and not lighting anything on fire, you don't care. One of them asks if they can go outside and you bark no before they finish the sentence. You're not about to let your half-dry linens become sledding capes again. Not after last time. You wring out a final pair of socks, this one with an unidentifiable stain that smells suspiciously like barn, and pin it to the last available inch of line space inside. The kitchen now looks like a textile swamp. Laundry drapes from every surface, backs of chairs, edges of shelves, even the corners of the table. It's like your home has turned into a sentient creature, slowly being digested by fabric. You step back and survey your kingdom of dampness, your eye twitching slightly. This brings us to the most cursed part of winter laundry, indoor drying. Once the outdoor line freezes over, or worse, breaks under the weight of an ambitious quilt, you're forced to bring everything inside, and that means every single wet garment starts raising the indoor humidity level until your windows are sweating, your bread goes mouldy in a day, and your wallpaper starts curling at the edges. The air gets heavy, sticky, and somehow both hot and cold at the same time. It smells like boiled bodies and regret. You are living in a damp fog of your own making. At this point in history, most houses didn't have exhaust fans, proper ventilation, or even decent airflow. You crack a window to try and release the swamp gas, but the moment you do, a blast of Arctic air punches you in the teeth. You shut it immediately. Fine, you'll just breathe wet laundry for the next 12 hours. Now, scholars still argue about the hanging methods used during this time. Some believe ceiling racks were the best option, pulley-operated, high above the stove where heat could rise. Others say the backs of chairs and wall hooks were more practical. Either way, nobody invented a perfect solution. People just layered their homes in wet clothing and hoped the heat from the stove would dry things before mildew set in. You opt for both. The ceiling rack holds the larger pieces: blankets, sheets, towels. Everything else hangs where it fits. You shuffle through the maze of garments like a laundry ghost, pushing skirts out of the way, ducking under dripping bloomers, whispering prayers to the stove gods. If you trip, you'll bring the whole system crashing down. You walk like you're crossing a battlefield. The fringe belief here: some said that drying underclothes indoors invited bad spirits, because underwear was considered too intimate to be exposed to shared air. You've never cared about that. If some ghost wants to haunt your damp drawers, let them. Maybe they'll take over laundry duty. The fire hisses again. Another log, another ritual. You're starting to think your life is just one long list of things that need feeding. Stoves, children, laundry lines, livestock, husbands. And what feeds you? Cold biscuits and the fantasy of running away to a warm place where laundry is done by sea breeze and mermaids. By now your arms feel like iron rods. Not strong, just heavy. Your back is a topographical map of pain. The tendons in your hands feel too short for your fingers. You move like a puppet made of wet clay. The house is quiet except for the hiss of steam, the occasional drip, and your own breathing. And still, somehow, you're not done. You grab the next handful of socks. They stare back at you. You stare back harder. You might cry, you might laugh, you might challenge them to a duel. No one would blame you. The line creaks. The stove crackles, and the ritual continues. Your fingertips have gone from numb to burning to that weird zone where you're not entirely sure if they're still attached. A slight bend sends jolts through your wrists, and your shoulders have settled into a dull, vibrating ache like someone's playing a cello inside your bones. The laundry fort in the corner has collapsed on the youngest child, who is now giggling wildly underneath a mound of stiffened bloomers and damp chemises. You don't even react. At this point, as long as nobody's bleeding or actively setting laundry on fire, they can reenact the fall of Rome in socks for all you care. The steam has thickened to a fog, coating every window with condensation and turning the kitchen into a humid greenhouse of misery. You glance at the ceiling and notice the familiar drip forming in the corner. Mildew's polite way of saying hello. Another winter wash day. Another gift from moisture's long, slow conquest of your house. And now you're back at the boiler, which is beginning to spit and hiss like it has opinions. The water's dangerously low. You need more. Of course you do. So you pull on your boots, still wet from earlier, and trudge outside yet again. The cold bites at your ears with renewed enthusiasm, and your breath fogs so thick you can't see the bucket in your hands. You cross the icy yard like a woman on a pilgrimage, passing the frozen clothesline where your earlier efforts have become stiffened laundry statues. You bump one accidentally and it cracks, literally cracks. A frozen shift shears in half like a porcelain plate, and you just stare at it. A part of you wants to laugh. Another part wonders if this is what defeat looks like. The well rope is frozen again, naturally. You wind and tug until the ice pops and the pulley groans. The bucket drops, hits water with a distant plop, and you slowly reel it in, muscles shaking. It sloshes, splashes onto your skirt, and the cold is immediate. You have about 4 minutes before the water in the bucket starts forming a crust on top. You don't even think anymore, just move, slow and determined, back inside where the fire welcomes you like a passive-aggressive friend who says, "Oh, you're back already?" You pour the water in, steam rises again. The boil resumes its angry bubbling. Your next load: outerwear. Heavy wool coats, cloaks, and the kind of overlayering that was the 1800s version of going outside clothes. These things are monstrous. Thick, mud-crusted, and so full of lingering odours that you could probably guess which animal your husband brushed against last week, just by sniffing the sleeve. You eye them with dread. They eye you back. It's mutual. You start with a coat, long, double-breasted, weighted down by at least a pound of mystery. It hits the water like a stone and tries to drown itself. You wrestle it under, kneeling over the tub, arms deep in greyish suds, straining against the saturated weight. When it's fully submerged, you breathe a little. Then you start to scrub. This isn't like washing underclothes or socks. This is war. The wool doesn't budge. The grime laughs at your efforts. You grab a hard-bristled brush, knuckles screaming, and begin attacking the sleeve like it personally offended you. Your movements are jerky now, clumsy. Soap flies. You're not sure what's wetter, your coat, your face, or your spirit. There's a historical note here worth pausing for. In the mid-1800s, wealthier households had coat days, where outer garments were cleaned separately, often by hired help or sent out to professional laundresses who specialised in thick fabrics. But in homes like yours, it all lands on your plate, literally and figuratively. There's no off day, no help, no break. You are the laundress, the dryer, the folding service, and the stain analyst. And speaking of stains, here's a quirky little trick from the era. Some people would rub lemon peels or vinegar into stained wool, then lay the coat in fresh snow and beat it with a stick. It was said to drive out the dirt. You've tried it. All it did was give you arm cramps and make your coat smell like salad dressing. You wring out one coat, barely. It takes your whole body, twist, lean, grunt, twist again, and still drips like a leaky roof. You hang it inside knowing full well it won't dry for 3 days and will probably fall off the rack twice in the middle of the night. The second coat is even worse. Bulkier, smellier. A broken button scratches your wrist. You swear under your breath. You'd apologise to the children for your language, but they've heard worse from you while you were peeling potatoes. The kitchen is now a laundry jungle. Cloaks dangle overhead, coats loom like bears, steam curls off sleeves. You can't tell if you're breathing air or wool. Everything is damp. Everything is heavy. You shift a basin and hear your spine crack like a gunshot. Someone knocks on the door. You freeze. No one visits on laundry day. You limp over, open it slowly, and see your neighbour standing there with a shy smile and 2 large bundles in her arms. "Thought I'd wash with you today," she says, eyes hopeful. She's holding more clothes. You look at her. You look at the mountain behind you. Then you step aside and let her in. Now here's a little discussed cultural reality. Sometimes laundry was communal. Not fun, not relaxing, but at least shared. Women would gather to scrub side by side, and if they had enough breath left, talk, complain, laugh even. In a world where silence was heavy and work was endless, laundry day became one of the few times you weren't completely alone in your labour. She sets down her basket. You don't say much. She doesn't either. But the space changes. There's something about another body in the steam, another pair of hands scraping knuckles on the washboard, that makes it feel just slightly more bearable. You hand her soap. She brings her own clothespins. Together, you set to work. Debate still exists among historians about whether women found empowerment in this kind of suffering, or if it simply normalised the idea that their pain was the price of usefulness. You're too tired to decide, but you do feel something shift in your chest as the two of you silently tackle the next pile of shirts. Not joy, not quite, but not despair either. You glance out the window, the sun's gone, the sky is black. Somewhere outside another wind gust knocks a shirt off the line and into the snow. You don't care. You'll get it tomorrow. You rise the next morning with the kind of stiffness that doesn't fade. It just becomes part of your posture. Your hands, wrapped in strips of old cotton for bandages, throb with a dull, wet ache. Your back feels like it was worked over by an angry mule. And the worst part? You're not done. Laundry day doesn't end with one sunset. It bleeds into the next day, and the day after that, like ink soaking through paper. And today, it's frozen. You stumble into the kitchen, where yesterday's efforts still hang like ghosts. Coats, socks, chemises, towels, all stiff and suspended in a state of near dryness. The air is thick with the earthy funk of drying wool, boiled soap, and regret. You crack open the window for a breath of fresh air and are immediately slapped by a wall of Arctic wind. So you close it. Immediately, the stove is dead. No heat, no fire, just ashes and cold iron. You crouch to relight it, hands fumbling, your body groaning with resistance. It takes 3 tries to get the flame going, your breath fogging in the cold air, your knees aching like you're 90. Once it finally catches, you lean back against the wall and stare at the ceiling, where a damp pair of drawers dangles like some horrible makeshift chandelier. You don't even react, it's just part of the decor now, and then it's time to check the clothesline. You brace yourself, coat on, boots laced, scarf wrapped. The door creaks open with a whine and the world outside is white, everything glazed with a delicate crust of ice. The laundry line groans under the weight of frozen garments, sagging like a bad joke. The shirts you hung yesterday are now solid sheets of fabric, frozen in awkward shapes, one sleeve frozen in a wave, one dress curled in on itself like it gave up halfway through the night. You approach the line like it's a battlefield. The first shirt you touch is solid, not cold and stiff, solid. You give it a tug and it barely budges. The cloth fused to the line with a fine layer of frost. You try again, gently, then with more force, and finally it comes free with a brittle snap like cracking a piece of firewood. You stare at it in your hand, shaped like a person without the person, and laugh once, quiet and slightly unhinged. There's an old trick for thawing frozen laundry. Bring it inside and hang it near the stove, let the ice melt, and then wait for it to dry again. So now your job is hauling these garments, each as heavy as a newborn goat, back into the house one by one. They creak in your arms, one stocking actually shatters as it bends. You set it aside like it's injured. Here's the kicker. Frozen clothes don't dry well. They steam, they drip, and they smell. You arrange them on the drying rack and pray to every minor household god you've ever invented. The clothes begin to thaw, water pooling on the floor, condensation forming on every surface. You're back to living in a steam lodge of your own making, only with more mildew and fewer benefits. A fringe fact that's honestly more sad than helpful. Some women in colder regions used to press partially frozen clothing between hot bricks or irons to speed up the drying. It didn't work particularly well and occasionally resulted in scorched, misshapen drawers. But hey, when you're desperate, burning your underwear seems like a reasonable trade-off. You glance at your youngest child, who has taken 2 frozen socks and is using them as makeshift ice skates on the wood floor. You say nothing. Honestly, if it keeps them busy and out of the laundry swamp, you'll allow it. Your neighbour returns, bless her, her arms full of damp shirts and an expression that says she too has gone through the stages of grief. She doesn't speak much this morning, neither do you. The two of you move like wartime medics, attending to garments, rearranging the indoor line, replacing sopping towels with merely damp ones, and stepping carefully around the lake now forming beneath the ceiling rack. At one point she picks up a shirt and murmurs, "This one's frozen to the chair," and neither of you reacts. That's just life now. Outside, the sun refuses to appear. The clouds hang low and grey. You can't help but glance at the sky and mutter, "Don't even think about snow," like you're threatening a wild animal. The clouds do not care. There's a scholarly conversation somewhere about how this particular kind of winter labour shaped emotional endurance. Some say the relentless repetition of domestic work dulled the edge of despair. Others argue it made women quietly furious in a way that built generational resilience. You don't know which is true, but as you shake out a frozen undershirt and feel your shoulders scream in protest, you do know this. No one does this kind of laundry without becoming someone else. Harder, quieter, somehow still standing. After an hour, you realise the only reason your feet are still dry is because you've been standing in the same puddle since dawn. You fetch old towels, already sour with mildew, to mop up the new mess. The cycle begins again. Drying one thing means wetting something else. The more you move forward, the more everything just shifts sideways. A moment of humour. Your neighbour tries to lift a frozen petticoat from the rack and it knocks her square in the face. You both freeze. Then she laughs, a tired, barky sound, and you laugh too. Not because it's funny, but because the alternative is weeping into your soup pot. It's not camaraderie, it's trench warfare, but with drawers and stockings. By midday, your entire home is transformed into a shrine of suspended, damp suffering. If someone walked in off the street, they'd assume you were drying laundry for a boarding school full of ghosts. The air is heavy, the light dim, the mood somewhere between absurd and defeated. And still, there are clothes that need washing. You pause at the sight of the last load in the basket. Flannels, mostly. Heavy, thick, and half-frozen already. The thought of dunking them into boiling water again makes your eyes twitch. You glance at your neighbour. She nods, no words, just that understanding. You pick up the first flannel and carry it to the basin. It's not about finishing, it's about surviving. You barely notice your hands anymore. They've crossed into that surreal territory where sensation fades into the background like white noise. Whether they're wet, frozen, or bleeding, you honestly couldn't say. They just keep moving, mechanical and numb. The flannel shirt you're scrubbing now is dense, its fibres packed with a week's worth of wood smoke sweat and stubbornness. It soaks it up water like it's auditioning to become a sponge, and as you heave it across the washboard, your shoulder makes a popping sound that's definitely not ideal. The kitchen is a full-blown fog zone now. Every window is weeping. You've stopped wiping them down because really, what's the point? The stove hisses under the weight of wet air. The walls seem to be shrinking inward, and you haven't seen dry floorboards in 24 hours. Everything squelches. You squelch. And the clothes, dear God, the clothes, hanging like condemned prisoners from every hook, chair back and ceiling beam. You could build a map of misery just charting what's drying where. You move on to the next flannel, this one a child's, small but somehow heavier than logic allows. It smells like dirt and hay, and when you turn it inside out, you find a half-melted peppermint stick in the pocket. You sigh, then you eat it. Yes, it's soggy. Yes, it tastes like soap. You don't care, this is where you are now, hunched over a steaming tub, chewing a filthy peppermint and washing someone else's filth out of a shirt that likely has holes you didn't notice until now. And then you drop it. The shirt slips from your hands and hits the floor with a loud, wet splack. You stare at it for a full 5 seconds, deciding whether you have the emotional fortitude to pick it up again. You do not. You sit on the edge of the stool and just watch it lie there, flat, mocking you. There's a strange comfort in that moment. The acceptance that things will never be clean enough, that laundry, especially in winter, is not a task with an end. It's a Sisyphean cycle of dirt, soap, steam and cold. You don't win laundry, you just survive it. But survival doesn't mean silence. You call out to your eldest, who's been avoiding the washroom all morning under the noble guise of doing lessons. He drags himself in, shoulders slumped like he's heading to a funeral. He takes one look at the mess and mutters, "Again?" You resist the urge to throw the washboard at him. Barely. You hand him the next flannel and tell him to rinse. He groans. You don't care. He starts dunking the fabric into the second basin, too fast, splashing water everywhere, and you sigh in that long-suffering way that mothers have perfected through millennia. Slower, you say. I'm going slow. You're rinsing it like it insulted your sister. Well, maybe it did. You can't even argue. Not today. Here's a quirky tidbit to lighten the mood. During the 1800s, some women believed hanging a flannel shirt inside out would keep the wearer from catching colds. No one knows where this came from. Possibly superstition, possibly a misunderstood health tip, but plenty swore by it. So you do it now. Not because you believe it, but because if one of these kids gets sick after all this effort, you will scream loud enough to wake the county. You glance at the line, now sagging so low it's practically a floor decoration. Frozen garments are slowly softening into limp, damp sadness, and the ones closest to the stove are starting to steam. It's like a sauna where everything smells like sheep. At this point, your neighbour has transitioned into full zombie mode. She doesn't speak anymore. She just nods when handed another shirt, scrubs it with mechanical precision, then wrings it out with all the energy of a haunted marionette. You understand, you're there too. The two of you are bonded now in this grim ritual. If she ever commits a crime, you'll lie for her. If she vanishes, you'll suspect the coats. Mid-scrub, you look down at your hands and notice something new. Tiny white blisters at the base of your fingers. Chilblains. A delightful winter laundry bonus, courtesy of the hot-cold rotation you've been treating your skin to for 2 days straight. They itch, they sting, they don't care that you're busy. You wrap a rag around your hand and keep scrubbing, because what else are you going to do? There's a mild debate among historians about the pace of chores in the 1800s, whether things like laundry were done all in one go, or stretched out over several days. Some say that it depended on the size of the household. Others argue that by necessity laundry was never really done, just rotated, which makes sense because you're on day 2, and you're still finding mystery socks under furniture and underthings hidden in linen piles. You scrape the last flannel shirt against the washboard. The water is a dark, sickly grey now, and the soap bubbles have vanished entirely. You consider dumping it, but you're too tired. The next shirt can live in swamp water. And here comes the wind again, whining against the house like a pack of wolves, making the frozen garments on the outdoor line sway and clink together like bones. You glance out the window and watch a shirt sleeve wave at you sarcastically. You wave back with your middle finger. Eventually the last shirt is wrung and pinned. The last rag hung near the fire, the floor mopped with old towels, and the boiling pot finally allowed to simmer down. Your kitchen still looks like a textile asylum, but for a moment, a brief, flickering moment, you allow yourself to sit, really sit. You ease onto the stool again, joints cracking, and rest your head in your hands. The quiet creeps in slowly, ooey, like a cat you forgot you owned. The kids have retreated. Your neighbour's gone to check on her firewood. And you're just there, breathing steam and surrounded by your own perseverance. You close your eyes, not for sleep, just for pause, and that's when someone calls from the other room, "Ma, I spilled milk on my church shirt." Of course you did. You don't answer right away. You just sit there, eyes closed, breathing in and out while your body runs through a silent checklist of new and existing injuries. Your back, still tight as a laced corset on a bloated day. Your shoulders might just pop off if you raise your arms again. Your hands, somewhere between medieval peasant and cracked porcelain doll. But sure, let's add milk on the church shirt to the lineup. Why not? That's just the kind of poetic little kick the universe loves to throw at you when you're down. Milk, white and pure, dumped all over the one garment you actually care about not smelling like death and ash. You stand slowly, very slowly. Your knees argue. Your neck cracks. You mutter something that sounds vaguely biblical and entirely threatening. In the next room, the child calls again, "Sorry," as if that makes a difference. But you're already on your way. Because of course you are. The shirt is worse than you thought. Not just spilled milk, but a splash pattern that somehow made its way up both sleeves and across the back, like your child decided to baptize it in dairy. You sigh so deeply your soul briefly exits your body and hovers near the rafters. This is where things get complicated. The shirt is white, cotton, thin and delicate enough that one wrong move with your lye soap will turn it into a see-through horror with lace you didn't want. It was never meant to be scrubbed like a flannel or beaten over a rock. It was meant to be gently washed, pressed, and laid in a drawer with lavender sachets like something out of a Jane Austen novel. But here it is, crusty and cold and in desperate need of attention. You gather it gingerly like an injured bird and bring it into the washroom. You know better than to throw it into the general vat of despair. You'll need a separate basin, cleaner water, and patience you do not possess. The fire in the stove is still holding, but just barely. You feed it more kindling, stoking it up again until the flames catch and the room begins to glow with that dull, flickering orange that makes everything look just a little haunted. You fill a fresh pan with snow-packed water, no time for another well run, and wait while it melts down into a usable state. Slowly the ice groans and cracks into water. While it warms, you grab the homemade soap and a small cloth. This won't be a washboard job. This will be a painstaking blot and dab operation, the kind usually reserved for wedding linens or the underthings of women far richer than you. You dip the cloth into the warm water and begin blotting the milk stains. It's already started to sour, of course, because why wouldn't it? You mutter something unkind about cows. As you dab and work the soap gently into the fibres, you're reminded of all the laundry that isn't just fabric. The Sunday shirts, the baby gowns, the table linens inherited from your mother's mother. These aren't just dirty clothes, they're stories, memories, problems, burdens. There's a moment of unexpected peace in this part. The quiet act of saving something delicate from the mess. No scrubbing, no boiling, just soft care. A strange contrast to the brutality of everything else you've done today. You catch yourself humming under your breath, the same tune your mother used when she spot-cleaned collars at the table with a bowl of water and vinegar. She always said, "Take care of the small things. The big things fall apart no matter what." The shirt's starting to brighten. The milk loosens its grip. You rinse the cloth and repeat the process, working in small circles until the stain is nearly gone. Not perfect, but better. And better is enough. Here's your oddball fact for this round. In the 1800s, it was believed that if you washed a white garment under a full moon, it would stay white longer. Sounds poetic, until you realise that meant someone, somewhere was outside at midnight, scrubbing bloomers by moonlight just for the promise of brightness. Whether or not it worked is up for debate, but you imagine she probably liked the quiet. You look up. The children have gone quiet again, which is never a good sign. You yell a general, "What are you doing?" towards the back room, and a pause. Then a response. "Playing funeral." You sigh. As long as they're not burying anything alive, you'll allow it. The white shirt goes on the inner line above the stove, carefully pinned by the armpit so it doesn't stretch into some shapeless mess. You admire it for a second, this tiny victory, glowing like a tired flag above the battlefield of your home. You won't remember it tomorrow, probably, but right now, it counts. The house is so saturated with damp that even the floorboards feel like they're sweating. You shove a few towels along the edges of the hearth to soak up the pooling water and check the ceiling for fresh drips. Mildew started forming in the upper corner, great, and the smell of it mixes with soap, wool, and scorched pine. A few final pieces still sit in the laundry basket, some underwear, a pair of stockings, a nightshirt with buttons barely holding on. You sigh again, deeper this time, and reach for the nightshirt. It smells like whoever wore it slept through a barn fire. You toss it into the lukewarm rinse basin, soap it up, and start working it over by hand. By now the motions are automatic. Your brain checks out. You're thinking of bread dough, of eggs, of what's left in the cellar, of not laundry. It's something women have done for generations, float away mentally while their hands continue the grind. Maybe it's prayer, maybe it's daydreaming, maybe it's some survival instinct that allows you to disassociate just enough to keep from screaming. There's a scholarly theory that domestic work like this created a kind of meditative mental space. One of the few times women were left alone with their thoughts, even if their bodies were doing 10 hours of hard labour. Another argument says it numbed them out of noticing their own exhaustion. Both might be true. Either way, you get the nightshirt done, and that's all that matters. You pin it beside the white shirt, eyeing your crooked little indoor line sagging under the weight of barely dry effort. The house smells awful. You smell worse. And someone just knocked over the wood bin again. But the shirt is clean, and you're still standing. The wood bin lies in a heap beside the stove. Scattered logs, a splintered handle, sawdust everywhere. You stare at it for a long moment, not blinking, not moving, just watching. The mess isn't even impressive, it's just annoying, like the universe is sending you little love notes that read as still not done. You consider ignoring it. Just stepping over the logs and pretending you live in a lovely rustic cabin where fallen kindling is aesthetic, not chaos. But the fire is your lifeline right now. You can't ignore it. So with the enthusiasm of a snail, you bend down and start picking up the pieces. The children are in the other room now, playing some game involving string and, based on the shouting, a hostage situation. You let them be. You'll intervene if the furniture gets flipped. Right now, the logs are priority number one. You stack them carefully beside the stove, rubbing the sting out of your palms. One of the pieces is wet, useless. You toss it aside with unnecessary aggression. Once the fire is fed, the stove begins to hum again. A low, comforting crackle that you feel more than hear. You crouch in front of it, eyes glassy, face warmed for the first time in hours. The relief is brief, though. A few feet behind you, one of the towels above the fire drips a steady rhythm onto the floor. The ceiling rack creaks ominously. You really should mop again. You rise slowly and drag a bucket beneath the towel just in time to catch the next drop. It hits with a soft plip, joining a modest puddle of rinse water and melted frost that's spread across the floor like it's trying to escape. You throw down another sacrificial towel to mop it up. That makes 3 on the floor now, all destined to smell like swamp by morning. You're halfway through wringing out the last pair of underthings when your neighbour reappears in the doorway, cheeks red, a new basket of laundry in her arms. "No," you say flatly before she even speaks. She smirks and steps inside anyway, shaking snow off her shoulders. "Just a few things," she says, clearly lying. The basket is heaped like a miniature mountain. You glance at it, then at her, then back at the basket. It's mostly men's shirts, coarse, thick, stiff with sweat and soot. You give her a long, slow blink. She starts unloading them without asking. So here you are again. The rhythm kicks back in, soap, scrub, rinse, wring, pin. You're too tired to feel rage, too deep into this cycle to even question it. Your hands move automatically. You've become a human extension of the washtub, a creature built of sinew, steam and sarcasm. Your neighbour hums a little tune as she works, like this is a casual sewing circle and not the 14th level of laundry hell. You start with a shirt that might as well be made of bricks. It's so caked with dried sweat and soot that you briefly wonder if someone tried to tan leather with it. You dunk it into the hot water, and it resists like a corpse sinking into quicksand. You press it down, the steam rising around your face, filling your nose and eyes with that familiar sting. And then you scrub. Not because you believe this shirt will ever be truly clean, but because the act of scrubbing is all that keeps you from unravelling. Let's talk about laundry as social punishment, shall we? In many households, especially those with money, laundry was handed off to the help. That meant women like you, homos, washerwomen or indentured girls, were saddled with the back-breaking task, while the madam of the house enjoyed tea in her lace collar. Being assigned the laundry wasn't just labour, it was a ranking system. A declaration that you were on the lowest rung of the domestic ladder. In prisons and poorhouses, laundry duty was standard punishment. Too loud, too stubborn, refuse to behave? Fine. Go break your hands on someone else's dirty trousers. It was meant to exhaust you into obedience. And yet, here you are, exhausted, obedient, but still standing. You wring out the shirt and hang it up next to its equally depressing siblings. Your neighbour tackles a pair of trousers, muttering about some mystery stain that won't come out. You offer her a bottle of vinegar and a vague blessing. Time is passing strangely now. You've entered that late-day haze where minutes blur into each other. You're sweating but cold, starving but nauseous, exhausted but somehow unable to stop. There's still laundry to do. There's always laundry to do. You check the stove again, still burning. You check the ceiling rack, dripping, sagging, hanging on by sheer willpower. Quirky fact for you, in especially poor households, families' numbers sometimes shared a single set of outer clothes. When wash day came, one person would stay indoors, usually naked or wrapped in a sheet, while their outfit was being cleaned. If someone visited during that time, too bad. It was known as shirt day, and everyone knew not to stop by. You think about that for a moment. Glance around your own mess of garments and decide you're only one broken clothesline away from instituting a no-visitors policy of your own. The children peek in with wide eyes, wrinkling their noses at the thick air. "It smells like feet," one of them announces. "It's your father's shirts," you reply. They giggle and vanish again. A few more shirts go through the process. One of them loses a button, which you pocket with a resigned grunt. You'll sew it back on later, or never. Probably never. There's an argument among scholars about whether the hardship of chores like this fostered strength, or simply wore women down to the root. One side insists it created a sort of unspoken resilience, a quiet power. The other side says no, it was just exploitation. Long-term, systemic devaluation of women's time and energy. You don't need an academic paper to know the truth. You just need to look at your hands. Your neighbour finishes her last shirt. You both lean against the stove, shoulders slouched, faces flushed from heat and exhaustion. "Still better than birthing calves," she mutters. You nod, barely, and then the ceiling rack groans, loudly. You look up, and before you can even move, the whole thing comes crashing down. Half-dry shirts, underthings, and 2 towels hit the floor in a wet, steaming pile. The wood slats clatter against the iron stove with a thunk that could wake the dead. Silence. Then your neighbour says, "Well, at least it's warm now." You both laugh. Wild, delirious, genuine. The first real laugh in 2 days. You wipe your eyes. She picks up a shirt. You start rearranging the line, because it's still laundry day, and you're not done yet. The smell hits you before the realization does. It's not the usual blend of steam and soap and faint regret. It's something sharper, more bitter. Your nostrils flare and you glance at the stove, then at the damp pile of garments you just pulled off the floor. And there it is. A thin plume of smoke curling up from one of the towels, one corner resting just a little too close to the firebox. You lunge, grabbing the singed fabric and flapping it wildly, smothering the ember before it turns into a kitchen-wide spectacle. The children cheer from the doorway like they've just watched a bear wrestle a cow. You don't react, you're too tired for emotion. But internally, you register this new smell, scorched cotton, and add it to the growing bouquet of laundry day fragrances. Crisis averted for now. You lay the crispy towel out on the hearth to cool, running your fingers over the brown mark like it's a battle scar. It is, in a way, a reminder that the line between survival and catastrophe is very, very thin unless you're drying clothes in a house held together by fire and hope. Outside, the sun is sinking. What little daylight filtered through the overcast sky is now gone, swallowed by early winter darkness. You light the oil lamp hanging near the window, its dim glow casting a yellow haze over the draped linens and sagging lines. It's the kind of light that makes everything look older, like the walls themselves remember every wash day before this one, and they aren't impressed. You make your rounds, checking each garment for dryness. Some are nearly there, some are wetter than they were this morning thanks to the condensation, the steam, and a particularly dramatic moment where your neighbour spilled half a rinse basin. You don't blame her, you barely remember your own name at this point. Let's talk about soap again. Yours is nearly gone now, a slumping lump of homemade lye soap, greyish and slick. You chip off another piece with a kitchen knife, the block crumbling slightly. It smells harsh, like fire and old fat. You used to measure out your ingredients carefully, rendered pig tallow, ashes soaked in rainwater, but this last batch was a rush job, made while juggling bread dough and a toddler with a fever. You used too much lye. You know it. Your hands definitely know it. Historically, lye soap was both miracle and menace. It could strip grease off anything, dishes, fabric, skin, you name it. But it could also eat holes in your clothes and leave your hands raw and cracked. Some women mixed it with salt or starch to make it gentler, but most didn't have the time or materials for that kind of luxury. You certainly didn't. Not this month. Not with wood to chop, mouths to feed, and a dozen garments hanging around the kitchen like damp ghosts. You dip another undershirt into the basin and start scrubbing. You can't stop now, not with half a basket still sitting in the corner, staring at you like it's personally offended you haven't gotten to it yet. Your neighbour has gone quiet again, absorbed in her own rhythm. The children, mercifully, have all retreated to the back room, lulled into stillness by the heavy warmth and the constant hum of steam. You'd join them. Oh, how you'd love to collapse into a pile of quilts and pretend the outside world doesn't exist, but your brain is too wired to let you rest. You move on to the next item, a pair of bloomers, thick cotton, soaked through, and folded in on itself like a soggy paper lantern. You shake it out and it slaps you in the face. Of course it does. You close your eyes and inhale deeply, not in calm, in surrender. You dunk them, scrub them, wring them, hang them, repeat. By now the floor is slick again. No amount of toweling will keep it dry. You shuffle around like you're walking on ice, arms out for a balance, praying you don't end up slipping and snapping a hip. You know women who've fallen like that. One cracked her tailbone, another broke her collarbone on the corner of a wash basin. Laundry is dangerous. Nobody ever talks about that. But it is. There's a little-known fringe belief from some rural households that wash water shouldn't be dumped after sundown. Keeps the spirits awake, they said. Something about stirring up bad luck. You're not particularly superstitious, but when your neighbour glances at the back door and mutters, "Should we wait till morning?" you shrug. Not because you believe it, just because the idea of hauling a sloshing bucket out into the snow in pitch black sounds like a bad decision even without ghost logic. So the dirty water stays. It stews gently in the corner like a pot of liquid sins. The rest of the night becomes a blur. You scrub more bloomers, you find another mystery sock, you repair a fallen line with an old scarf and 3 mismatched clothespins, you check the stove, you stoke the fire, you mop the corners, you answer a muffled child's question about biscuits, you forget to eat any yourself. There's ongoing academic debate about whether women considered this type of labour satisfying. Some argue that the act of cleaning something, making order from mess, was emotionally gratifying. Others say that narrative was built after the fact, romanticised to justify the crushing workload. You lean somewhere in the middle, there's a flicker of pride when you hang a clean shirt. A small glow, but satisfaction? That's a luxury you haven't had time for today. Eventually, the house quiets to a low hum. The stove purrs, the garments sway slightly in the heat draft. Your neighbour bids you good night and trudges out into the snow, her shawl pulled tight and her hands tucked into her armpits. You watch her go, a silhouette fading into the dark, and then close the door gently behind her. You sit, no one calls your name, no one spills anything, no one knocks anything over, the fire crackles, a drip falls into the bucket. The bloomers swing like they're rocking themselves to sleep, and you, wrung out, bone-tired, smelling like damp soap and scorched towel, you close your eyes. Not for long, just for now. The morning sneaks in without asking, just a dim blue leaking in through frosted windows and settling over everything like a sigh. You're still sitting where you fell asleep, in the kitchen, curled in an awkward C-shape on the stool, head tilted at an angle that your neck is now deeply unhappy about. Your first waking thought is pain. Second, laundry. Third, what fresh hell awaits. You uncurl slowly, every joint creaking in protest, and stand to survey the battlefield. The laundry still hangs, now fully dried, or at least pretending to be. The towels over the hearth are crispy and misshapen. The bloomers are stiff in the waistband. A pair of socks has fallen behind the stove and lies half-toasted like some forgotten snack. You pick them up and toss them into the clean pile, because at this point, close enough. You shuffle to the stove and open the iron door. The fire has gone to embers, but the coals are still red beneath the ash. You poke it back to life, toss in a few sticks, and blow softly until the flames flicker up again. Your hands are cracked and raw. There's a small cut on your thumb that's crusted with soap and grime. You flex your fingers slowly, like you're reminding yourself they're still there. And then you remember the underthings. It's always the underthings. They were buried at the bottom of the last laundry basket, half frozen and soiled from too many days of "it'll wait until wash day." The unspoken rule around here is that you never mention them unless it's absolutely necessary, which it now is. You fish them out, one piece at a time, camisoles, drawers, half-shredded stays, each garment somehow more tired than the last. Some of them are yours. Most of them aren't. The fabric is thin, worn from too many boilings, the colour faded from white to a kind of tired grey. These are the things no one sees, but they still matter. Or at least they're supposed to. You drop the first camisole into a basin of warm water and lie, and begin the slow, awkward process of scrubbing it by hand. No washboard here, you don't want to tear it. The fabric is too soft, too ready to give up, so you swirl it gently, pressing the seams between your fingers, watching as little clouds of who knows what swirl out into the water. It's always strange dealing with these garments. There's something intimate about it, even when it isn't your own, especially when it isn't. You learn things you're not meant to know. Someone's sweat, someone's stains, the soft, sour scent of a body working hard through winter. In polite society, nobody talks about underthings. Not in front of company, not even among friends. The laundry list is all linens and skirts and blouses. The real business gets left out. But these pieces, these are where the work lives, where the body touches the cloth, where secrets stay until you scrub them out or stitch over them. There's a historical silence about women's undergarments in laundry records. Diaries and inventories mention wash days and linens, but rarely describe the tedious, awkward chore of scrubbing bloomers with menstrual stains or sweat marks. It was invisible work, even more invisible than the rest. But you know better. You're elbow deep in that history now, swirling through layers of it. You pick up a pair of drawers, yours probably, and hold them up. The waistband's gone slack, the seam's nearly transparent. Another few washings and they'll disintegrate. You sigh and begin cleaning them anyway. They won't last, but they need to make it through at least one more week. You think about patching them briefly, and then laugh softly. There are better causes to donate your needle to. Here's a delightfully weird fringe fact. Some households in the 1800s believed it was bad luck to wash underthings on a Sunday. Something about inviting shame or sickness. You're not sure where the superstition came from, but you understand the instinct. There's something almost sacred about these garments. Not because they're special, but because they're so relentlessly unseen. They're the last to be washed, the first to fall apart and the easiest to forget. But not by you, not today. As you scrub, your hands sting with every squeeze. The soap bites deeper in the places where your skin is cracked. You wince, then keep going. One piece at a time. You don't even hang these on the main line. You pin them low near the stove, away from the window where a neighbour might glance in and see the private flutter of cotton. The children appear again, sleep-stained and barefoot, blinking at the kitchen's steam jungle. One of them points at a pair of drawers and whispers, "Are those yours?" And you shush him with a glare that could split a tree. He scurries off. You consider that your morning victory. By mid-morning the pile is down to the last camisole. The water is grey, full of secrets and lint. Your hands are numb again. But the drawer line is full, swaying gently in the stove's heat, drying the invisible labour of the body. This kind of work has no reward. No one thanks you for clean drawers. They'll never admire the way you scrubbed a petticoat waistband or saved a crumbling camisole with 3 stitches and prayer. But without this, without you, everything would collapse into stink and silence. You know that. You've always known that. There's still a debate in modern circles about how to talk about this kind of domestic labour, whether it's empowering or degrading, whether honouring it reinforces old roles or simply acknowledges reality. You're not interested in the debate today. You're too busy keeping the house from drowning in its own skin. You empty the basin, careful not to spill it on your already slick floor. You rinse the soap rag and lay it flat to dry. You wring out your last item, pin it quietly, and lean back against the table. Watching the garment sway, the steam hisses softly, the fire crackles low. You made it through another wash, and beneath the layers, beneath the wool and the starch and the soap, everything is clean, at least for now. You've started measuring time in petticoats. Not hours, not sunrises, just layers of fabric, one heavier and more cursed than the last. And this morning, as you stare down the pile of skirts and underskirts and overskirts and whatever the hell this ridiculous thing is skirts, you feel your soul quietly leave your body and hover somewhere near the rafters. You've already lived several lifetimes in the washroom this week. But the heavy stuff, the thick wool and twill and muslin layers that soak up water like emotional baggage, that's the boss level. You take the top skirt out of the pile, a thick, winter-weight woolen piece with a hem still caked in frozen mud. It crunches as you lift it. It's half a garment, half a weapon. You could probably use it to defend your homestead. You fold it like a tent and haul it toward the wash tub, every step more of a drag than a walk. This isn't laundry anymore, this is a strength trial. The skirt doesn't sink into the water so much as challenge it. You push down hard, both hands, your body leaning into it, and finally the water swallows it whole. Barely. The wash tub groans under the weight. You nearly do too. The skirt is so soaked it may have just gained a sibling. You lean back, hair damp from the steam, and begin to scrub. You used to like this skirt. It was warm, serviceable, a gift from your sister after your last one caught fire in a cooking accident. Long story, still too soon, but now it's your enemy. Its hem is a field of mystery stains. The pleats are so stiff they're practically armoured. You slap it onto the washboard and begin attacking it with soap like you're exercising a demon. You've long stopped being careful. Now it's just you and the fabric and the angry satisfaction of scraping dirt out of every stubborn seam. Your arms ache, your back groans, your hands, raw and cracked, keep going. Here's a fact for the day. Some skirts in the 1800s weighed up to 15 pounds when dry. When wet, you're basically washing a toddler. Multiply that by 3 or 4 layers, and it's not hard to see why laundry day felt like hauling livestock. And let's not even get started on hoop skirts. Luckily you don't have any of those. You would have thrown it in the fire by now just out of spite. The hardest part isn't the scrubbing, it's the wringing. Wringing out a wool skirt in winter is like trying to choke water out of a very stubborn dog. You wrestle it onto the wringing bench, grip it tight, and twist with everything you've got. Water pours out in slow, reluctant streams. Your arms tremble. You think about crying but decide against it. It's too wet already. You manage to wring it out enough to lift, and it still weighs more than your youngest child. You stumble toward the line with it dripping a path behind you. You throw it over the thickest part of the indoor rack, ignoring the loud creak it makes in protest. If it breaks, you'll just hang everything on your children's arms and tell them it's a game. The next petticoat is even worse. This one has lace. Why does it have lace? What sadistic designer looked at a heavy winter garment and thought, you know what this needs? A trim that can absorb triple its weight in snowmelt? You can already tell the lace is going to disintegrate the moment it touches hot water, but you have no choice. You do what has to be done. You dunk, you scrub, you mutter threats, you question every life decision that's brought you here. At one point the skirt tries to escape the tub, curling back out like it's climbing to freedom. You shove it back in and slam it down with your elbow. Not today, Satan. There's a theory among certain scholars that laundry work in this era was designed, if not intentionally then functionally, to break women's spirits. Keep them tired. Keep them focused on endless tasks so they wouldn't ask too many questions. But whoever came up with that theory clearly never washed 3 skirts in a row with homemade soap and bare hands. This isn't spirit breaking, it's spirit forging. You don't get through this by being weak. You get through it by becoming steel. By the 3rd petticoat your arms are shaking. You've started grunting like a farmhand. The kitchen looks like a forest of wool trees, heavy garments draped over every possible surface. The windows have fogged over entirely, the floor is slick again, and the fire has started hissing in protest at the constant wave of wet clothing breathing down its neck. You consider pausing, just sitting down for a moment, but then you glance at the last skirt, still folded in the basket, darker than the rest, thicker. You recognise it instantly. Your funeral skirt. It hasn't been worn in a long while, thank God, but it still has to be washed. Because if someone dies and it's not ready, you'll be wearing your church skirt with black gloves and praying no one notices, and they will notice. So with the solemnity of a knight preparing for battle, you lift it. It's heavier than you remember, stiffer. It smells like cedar and old air and grief. You dip it into the water slowly, like you're baptizing it. No rush, no muttering, just the quiet scrape of fabric sliding into warmth. There's something strange about washing a funeral skirt. It's not about dirt, it's about readiness, being prepared, keeping one small corner of your life clean enough for mourning. You scrub it gently. No anger here, just patience. You remember the last time you wore it, the walk to the cemetery, the smell of lilies, the way the hem dragged in the snow. You don't cry, you just scrub. You wring it out as best you can and hang it carefully. Draped over 2 lines so it won't crease, you step back, look at it. You nod once, barely. The fire crackles, the steam hisses, the line groans, but everything is hanging, for now. The skirts sway in the thick, humid air like damp flags of defeat. You watch them from your stool, shoulders slumped, hands dangling between your knees like you've just returned from war. You're not sure if you've won or lost. You only know that every muscle in your body feels like it's been chewed on by a grizzly bear and then gently dropped in the snow to stiffen. And you still haven't even touched the bedding. But before that, before you even think about more wringing, scrubbing, or hearing another splash, you need a moment. Just one, a cup of water, a breath of air, the luxury of not having boiling soap vapour in your eyes for 5 whole minutes. You glance at the clock, it's late morning probably, or early afternoon. Hard to tell when everything outside is either white or grey. It's all just a blur of freezing silence and the occasional crunch of boots on snow. You pour a ladle of lukewarm water into your tin cup and take a sip. It tastes like soap. Of course it does. At this point you're probably 30% lye by volume. Your insides are likely disinfected, which is a perk, you suppose. You lean against the table and let yourself go soft for a second, but the silence, that's when it creeps in. Not the peaceful kind, the suspicious kind. The children are quiet again. You set your cup down and step into the next room, where the smell of stale air and too many bodies in too small a space greets you like an old enemy. And there they are, huddled in a corner, all 4 of them, looking too innocent. You look down and see what they're hiding. The good quilt. The one that was not supposed to be used as a fort base. The one that now smells faintly of potatoes and someone's feet. You don't yell, you just stare at them. That's enough. Their eyes widen and they scatter like mice. You collect the quilt, now wrinkled and partially damp, and sigh. Back into the laundry pile it goes, which brings you begrudgingly to the subject of delayed washing. Because let's be honest, not everything gets washed every week, or even every month. There are clothes in this house that haven't touched water since the harvest, not because you're lazy, God no, but because you're not immortal. You can't possibly wash every stocking, every bonnet, every bloody bedsheet before winter turns the entire washline into an abstract art installation made of frozen misery. Some garments just wait, linger, exist in a state of barely tolerable filth, aired out and brushed off, tucked back into drawers with hopeful sachets and lies. A few articles haven't been washed since autumn. One pair of wool trousers hanging by the back door might be old enough to vote. You pretend not to smell them. Back in the kitchen, you stare at the next pile, a stack of cotton shirts with yellowed collars, 2 more chemises, and your husband's work overalls, which look like they lost a bar fight with the chimney sweep. You pick up the chemises first, lighter, easier, not soaked through with coal and wood smoke. You soak one, scrub the underarms, flick away bits of lint. Your body moves out of habit now, soap, rub, rinse, twist, hang, each motion muscle memory layered over fatigue. And then the lice come to mind, because of course they do. It's been a few months since the last outbreak in town, but the memory sticks. The shame, the scratching, the whispered accusations. Someone's youngest got a full shave behind the woodshed and had to wear a scarf for a month. You keep your eye on the children like a hawk now, scanning for suspicious head scratching or sudden requests for hats. And you've learned, not every dirty piece of laundry is just dirt. Sometimes it's alive. Historical fun fact, lice weren't just a nuisance, they were a seasonal epidemic. Winter, surprisingly, was prime lice season, since people layered up and wore their clothes longer between washes. And lice? Oh, they loved that. Thick petticoats, high collars, woolen socks. All perfect breeding grounds for little 6-legged horrors. You've had the joy of boiling your own sheets before, the smell of lye, sweat and regret clinging to every corner of the kitchen. You nearly passed out once from leaning too close to the pot. Your eldest still talks about that day like it was a battlefield moment. The day Mama hit the floor with a chemise in one hand and a spoon in the other. The chemise in your hand now is louse-free, thankfully. But you don't take chances. You dunk it in the hot rinse water, let it sit longer than necessary. Watching the bubbles rise to the surface, you pull it out, wring it tight and pin it on the line beside the funeral skirt from yesterday, now half dry and curled like old parchment. Your husband's overalls are next. You eye them like they're your dare. The cuffs are stiff with dried mud, and the knees are permanently stained with something you've stopped asking about. You dunk them. The water hisses, you sew, scrub. Your washboard makes an angry, scraping sound like it's trying to resign. And then you spot it. Another mystery stain. Something greenish-brown and sticky. Sap, maybe. Or animal something. You consider just cutting that piece out entirely. No one needs both knees, right? Your neighbour stops by briefly, snow clinging to her shawl. She peeks into your laundry dungeon, takes one look, and raises her eyebrows. "Still at it?" she asks. You nod, lips too dry to speak. She holds out a jar of preserves like a peace offering. "Trade you for a dry towel?" You make the swap in silence. No words needed. By the time she leaves, the kitchen smells faintly of strawberries, which somehow makes the whole place feel more tragic. You've never hated fruit before today. You rinse the overalls, wring them out with a strength you don't have, and stagger to the line. Every muscle protests. Your knuckles scream. Your back whispers threats, but you hang them up anyway. And then, as if summoned by the act of finally hanging the worst of it, a child yells from the other room, "Mama, I found another sock. It was in the soup pot." Of course it was. You laugh. Not loudly, just one dry little sound that escapes without permission. And then you go wash the sock. Because that's what you do. The sock, to its credit, is remarkably clean, probably from having spent an undisclosed amount of time simmering in yesterday's soup stock. It smells like onion and regret. You hold it between two fingers and tilt your head, considering whether it's even salvageable. It's your eldest's. Judging by the size and the fact that it's already patched in two different types of thread, this sock has seen things, and now it has seen broth. You toss it into the rinse basin with a resigned splash and decide not to think about it too hard. The children, having heard your laughter, always dangerous, have taken that as an invitation to be helpful. They return like a small, chaotic herd, arms full of forgotten clothes discovered in the darkest corners of the house. Some are damp, some are stiff, some are just suspicious. One of them offers up a bonnet that smells faintly of mice. Another holds a shirt like it might bite him. You accept each offering like a priest taking confessions, stacking them into the corner for your next wave of suffering. But now it's time to train your little army. You gesture them toward the small basin with the rinsed garments and explain once again how to wring out clothing without flinging water across 3 counties. They nod solemnly. You know it won't go well. It never does. But it's either that or let them run back into the snow and come home with frostbite nearises and fresh stains. One by one, they take turns, wrists twisting awkwardly, water dripping down their sleeves, faces scrunched in exaggerated concentration. The youngest gives up halfway through and begins swinging a sock over her head like a lasso. You snatch it mid-swing and hand her a towel instead. She pouts. You point to the dripping floor and raise an eyebrow. She gets the message. This is what real teaching looks like, you think? Not slates and chalk, but the sacred knowledge of survival. How to scrape grime from under a collar. How to hang drawers so they dry without stretching. How to hold a skirt while wringing it so you don't tear out the seams. These are the family secrets no one writes down. They're passed down in the sting of soap across raw knuckles, in the steam that sticks to your hair, in the half-sung warnings your grandmother used to murmur when starching a shirt. You remember one of them now, oddly. Turn the cuffs inside if you don't want your secrets showing. You have no idea what it meant back then. You still don't. But you flip the cuffs anyway. Historical reality check. By the mid-1800s it was completely normal, even accepted, for children to help with laundry, especially in larger households. Boys were often pulled into chopping wood and hauling water, while girls learned to scrub underthings and wring linens before the few could even write their own names. It wasn't considered help. It was just part of growing up. But kids, then as now, were chaotic little goblins. There are old journals that mention children washing clothes only to restain them by dragging them through the dirt, or dunking them in rinse water and then sitting on them. One account from 1846 describes a toddler who managed to unravel an entire dry line and use the frozen garments to build a fort. You don't have that level of ambition in your house, yet, but you stay alert. Back in your kitchen, your children begin hanging their wrung-out items on the lower line. They argue over clothespins. One pair of trousers falls and slaps someone in the face. There's a brief scuffle over who gets to hang the least wet shirt. You let them fight it out, it builds character. You slip away to boil another kettle of water, your fire's still alive, bless it, and top off the hot basin. You toss in a few final pieces from the mouse-smelling stack. One scarf, an apron, something that may have once been a sock but now looks like a sad mitten. And then you get to the starch. God help you, the starch. Homemade starch is its own category of suffering. You mix it by feel, a little flour, a little water, maybe a splash of leftover broth if you're desperate, which apparently you are today. You stir it into a paste, then dilute it with boiling water until it's just the right consistency. Not too thin or it won't stiffen anything, not too thick or your collars will turn into shovels. You once ruined an entire shirt by over-starching the cuffs. Your husband couldn't lower his arms all day. You test the batch by dipping a handkerchief. It soaks, drips, and clings like cold slime. Perfect. You take out the next batch of shirts, freshly washed, still all damp, and dip them one by one into the starch basin. It's a strange feeling knowing you're working this hard just to make your clothes less comfortable. But comfort isn't the point. Appearance is. The illusion of order, even when everything smells like lye, and your kitchen is a fabric jungle. Some women in the 1800s swore by starching everything. Shirts, skirts, underthings, even pillowcases. There were even starching contests at local fairs. You don't have the time or mental stability for that nonsense. But a stiff collar and flat pleats still give you a little flicker of satisfaction. Control, maybe. A tiny square inch of perfection in a house full of chaos. The children finish their part and scatter like marbles across the floor. One slides into the doorframe, another vanishes under the table. You leave them be. They've earned it. You hang your starched shirts carefully, piecing them so the pleats don't touch. They dry in funny shapes, like sails or folded flags. You'll have to press them later, but that's a future you problem. Present, you just wants to stop moving. There's still debate in domestic history circles over whether child labour in the home created resilience or trauma. You'd argue both. Your kids will grow up with blistered hands, sure, but they'll also never wonder where clean clothes come from. That counts for something. You take a seat again, not because the work is done, God no, but because your body is demanding it. You sip more water. The taste is still slightly meaty thanks to the soup sock incident. You've accepted it. One of the children climbs into your lap, all sharp elbows and damp hair, and curls up without asking. You don't protest, you just wrap your cracked hands around their small cold feet and hold them close to the stove. Laundry's not over, but for 5 minutes, you are. 5 minutes passes like a dream you can't quite remember. Warmth blooming in your lap, the fire humming low, the wet stink of boiled starch fading just enough for you to think, maybe this is fine. But your legs go numb beneath the weight of the child, who's now snoring faintly and drooling onto your apron, and the laundry calls again like a jealous lover. You peel the child off gently, set them down on a heap of mostly clean towels, and brace yourself for the next demon in the lineup. Linens, not clothes, linens. The difference matters. These are not forgiving garments. These are the tablecloths, the pillowcases, the doilies and napkins and dinner rags stained with everything from spilled gravy to ink and God knows what else. Some have embroidery, some have lace, some have the audacity to be white. And tonight's villain is the dinner cloth. You know the one. That enormous square of cotton that you only bring out for guests, holidays, and the occasional funeral spread. Someone, probably one of the children, possibly your husband, maybe a vengeful ghost, got jam on it. Blackberry, by the looks of it. Deep purple and mocking like a bruise that laughs at you. You begin by boiling water. Again, always boiling water. You feel like a witch brewing some ancient potion. Except there's no glamour to it. Just steam in your eyes and splinters in your kindling hand. The fire is your oldest companion and your most fickle enemy. Today it's behaving, mostly. You toss in more chopped pine and coax the flames until the water begins to tremble. The linen soaks reluctantly. You pre-scrub the jam stain with a scrap of lye soap that burns your skin but never quite your enemies. Then the whole cloth goes into the water like a shipwreck, sinking slowly, releasing flecks of dried food and dust from the folds. The water clouds immediately. Of course it does. You stir it with a wooden stick like you're churning butter or banishing a demon. The scent of scorched jam and old grease rises into the air, curling through the kitchen like failure. You stir harder. You're not giving up on this one, not because it matters. Not really, but because you need one small win. One thing to come out clean. It's said in some circles that boiling linen in winter makes the fabric brittle, but letting it sit to dirt it will attract moths. Either way, you lose. You're choosing the lesser evil. You always are. Another fringe fact for the day. In the 1800s, starch was sometimes applied to tablecloths so stiffly that guests couldn't properly fold their napkins or rest their elbows without sliding off the table. It was a status symbol, believe it or not. Hard, board-flat linens meant you had time to waste boiling cloth and ironing like a lunatic. A weird flex, as the children say, though yours haven't flexed anything but their vocal cords in the last 3 days. You let the cloth boil for as long as your conscience allows, then drag it out of the pot with tongs. The steam hisses. The fabric smokes. You slap it into the rinse basin with a spatter that soaks your sleeves instantly. You've stopped reacting to being wet. That's just your natural state now. Rinse, wring, repeat. You twist the cloth slowly, evenly, careful not to tear the corners that are already fraying. Every fibre groans. You do too. Once it's wrung out, you lay it flat across the drying rack. Not hung, laid. Hanging it will stretch the embroidery into abstract shapes. You smooth it down like you're tucking in a child, palms sliding over the still warm fabric, feeling for lumps or wrinkles. It will dry unevenly, it always does. And next, just to torture yourself further, you tackle the napkins. Tiny squares, yes, but soaked with last week's sins, gravy, wine, a questionable blot of something orange. They were deceptively difficult, like little puzzles of shame. You scrub one, rinse it, check the corner, sigh, scrub again. By the third one, you're muttering under your breath. By the sixth, you're singing old lullabies off-key just to keep yourself from yelling. You pause only once, to change the rinse water, which by now looks like it could kill a houseplant, and in that moment you hear it. The sound, a soft plop. You turn slowly and see one of the starched shirts from earlier has fallen into a puddle, collar first, the one with the tidy pleats you actually got straight. You take a breath, you walk over, you pick it up, it squelches, you do not scream, you just wring it out again and pin it back up, silently promising revenge on gravity itself. Your eldest reappears, trying to look helpful, and asks, "Is it almost done?" You pause. The honest answer is no. The other honest answer is never. But instead you say, almost. Because if you say never, you're afraid your legs will give out. There's an argument among social historians about whether women took pride in clean linens. Some say yes, keeping white tablecloths and perfect handkerchiefs was a sign of a well-run home. Others argue that any pride was mostly external pressure, the kind of thing you perform so no one talks about you behind your back. You say both. Pride, after all, is a funny thing. It hides in the smallest acts, the scrubbed cuff, the straight line, the boiled jam stain that almost, but not quite, disappears. You finish the napkins, lining them up like folded apologies, and move on to pillowcases. Each one is soft, slightly yellowed, perfumed faintly with the breath of too many sleepless nights. You scrub gently. You don't want to erase everything, just enough. One of the kids walks by and bumps a drying rack with their elbow. It wobbles. You say nothing. They freeze, wide-eyed. You nod at them slowly, like an ancient spirit choosing mercy. They tiptoe away. You glance at the fire, still burning. You glance at the sky through the fogged window, darkening again. How is it already evening? The linens hang now, steaming gently, dripping less than before. You exhale, long and low. You'd eat something, but everything you own smells like soap. You'd sleep, but the stove needs tending. You'd cry, but you're too dry for that. So you sit, and the jam stain, almost gone. The next morning doesn't arrive. It limps in, grey and indecisive, dragging itself through the frosted windows like it too didn't sleep well. You're up before it anyway. You never really went to bed. Not properly. Just drifted for a few hours on the edge of consciousness, curled beside the stove on a stack of folded towels that still smelled faintly of vinegar and wood smoke. When you stand, your back cracks loud enough to wake the child snoring in the corner. You stretch. You regret it. The air is cold again. Today, the forecast says storm. You know because your joints told you before your eyes even opened. That means one thing. Everything that's not dry yet needs to come inside. You glance toward the back door and brace yourself. It's worse than you thought. The outdoor clothesline is caught mid-lurch, a diagonal arc sagging under the weight of frozen garments that now look more like stiff canvases than anything wearable. The sky is steel grey and low, pressing against the trees, like a lid. You feel the first flake as you step outside, not fluffy, not soft, one of those early snowflakes that hits like a pebble and melts like spite. You scramble, is the only word for what you do next. A one-woman rescue mission, dragging in frozen laundry before it turns into icy sculpture. Each shirt is stiff, each skirt bends weirdly, and a pair of drawers actually snaps when you fold them wrong. Lovely. You stack them high in your arms and haul them back into the kitchen like firewood, slamming the door shut behind you with your hip. Now begins the true art form. Indoor drying during a snowstorm. First, you survey your territory. The kitchen already looks like a fabric jungle. The ceiling rack is full. The stove-side lines are crammed. The backs of chairs sag with stiff collars. The window ledges are streaked from dripping hems. You could open a boutique for haunted dolls and no one would blink. But you make space. You always make space. You toss a couple of semi-dry napkins back into the laundry basket, they can wear, and start rehanging the big stuff. Skirts, shirts, trousers, all of it steaming now as it starts to thaw in the warm, damp air. The snow outside thickens, falling in sideways gusts. You hear the wind whistle through the cracks in the doorframe. You shove a rolled towel against the base to stop the draft. The stove, bless its weary little heart, sputters with effort. You feed it more pine and scrapwood, watching the flames jump. Your entire day now hinges on this one fire and its ability to stay alive through the storm. It's less a heating device and more a teammate at this point. The air thickens fast. Within half an hour, the humidity rises so high you can taste of it. Your hair sticks to your forehead. Your hands, still wrapped in rag bandages from yesterday's laundry damage, glisten with the mix of sweat and condensation. The windows fog completely, erasing the outside world. You could be in a cave, or a swamp, a very flammable swamp. And then, without warning, the smell changes. It's subtle at first, just a shift. Less soap, more something sour. You sniff. Then again, you know that smell. Everyone who's ever had a drying rack too close to the stove for too long knows that smell. Mildew. Your neck tightens. You spin slowly, scanning the fabric forest for the culprit. It doesn't take long. There, on the bottom layer of the rack, where you stuff too many towels in too little space, you pull one free and the scent hits you full force. Warm, wet rot, you gag. Not dramatically, just enough to confirm that yes, the mildew is officially here. You try to hide your disgust from the kids. No use having them associate your face with fungal terror. You toss the towel into a separate basket, your maybe pile. Maybe it can be boiled. Maybe it can be saved. Maybe you'll just burn it and pretend it never existed. And now, the game becomes ventilation. You crack a window, just one. The cold bites immediately, but it also slices through the soupy air like a knife. The steam rushes out, the smell lifts slightly, and your lungs thank you. Of course, within moments the temperature drops 10 degrees and 2 shirts freeze in place mid-air. Worth it. Fringe fact time, in some houses, women would build makeshift drying tents over the stove, wooden frames with layers of canvas or blankets to trap the heat and dry clothes faster. Smart in theory. In practice, they often turned into mould caves if not aired out frequently enough. One bad drying tent could turn your entire linen closet into a petri dish. You don't bother building one. Your kitchen is a tent now. You rotate garments like a chess master, heavier items closer to the fire, delicate pieces to the outer perimeter. You press a few shirts between 2 hot bricks in the foolish hope that might dry them faster. It does, sort of. The cuffs come out warped, the collars sizzle faintly. You declare it a partial success and move on. The children return from wherever they were lurking and immediately complain about the smell. What is that? Did something die? Is it me? You hush them all with a glance and toss a sprig of dried mint into the stove. Not because it helps, just because it makes you feel better. There's an academic theory floating around that indoor laundry days like these actually restructured family dynamics. That the whole household was drawn into the orbit of the stove, the literal and figurative hearth. When the drying lines came indoors, families talked more, sat closer, shared warmth. And maybe that's true. But right now, it feels less like bonding and more like being trapped inside a boiling sock. You peel your damp apron off and replace it with a drier one from the hook. Not dry, mind you, just less wet. It's a luxury now. The fire crackles as you stir it again, and the room glows briefly golden. The snow outside shows no signs of stopping. Inside, the mildew backs off. A little. The shirt that froze earlier starts to droop into its original shape. And you keep moving. Because if you stop, something else will sour. There's a moment, brief, barely a breath, when you think the worst might be over. The mildew smell has faded into a tolerable background note. Just one flavour in the soup of air swirling around the kitchen. The fire is steady. The clothes have stopped dripping. You can walk through the room without brushing your face against a frozen petticoat. It's almost manageable. Then you pick up the apron. Not just any apron. The apron. The one with the delicate hand embroidery, the lace trim that serves no functional purpose, and the absurd stitched phrase along the bottom hem. Clean hands, clear conscience, a lie, if there ever was one. It's been sitting in a basket waiting for a clear stretch of weather to be hand-washed, starched and dried flat like it's in a boutique window and not the battleground of a storm-sieged laundry dungeon. But today there's no time for dainty drying. There's no space left on the lines. And quite frankly, you're in no mood to court mildew on delace. You lay it across a board near the stove, smoothing the damp cotton gently. A single stain glares at you from the middle. Old gravy, probably. Possibly ink. Could also be the result of someone sneezing into it. You stopped asking months ago. You mix up a bit of starch in the tin bowl and dip the edge of the apron in, watching the white cotton darken, stiffen. Then you begin pressing it, flat against the warm bricks, turning it inch by inch. No iron needed. Just steam and weight and stubbornness. Halfway through, one of the children stumbles in, bundled in every piece of clothing they own. "I think the roof is leaking again," he says cheerfully, like he's announcing that pie is ready. You freeze, because of course it is. You follow him to the pantry, where a single droplet of meltwater falls precisely and rhythmically from a crack in the ceiling and splashes onto the floor like it's marking time. You place a bowl beneath it, sighing, and decide to pretend that solves it. It won't, but there are 24 other catastrophes in line ahead of this one, and you're triaging based on moisture and personal rage. Back in the kitchen, the apron is too stiff now. You overstarched it again. The hem could double as a bread knife. You mutter something ancient and not quite polite and try to fold it, but it cracks. There's no recovery from that. It goes on to the maybe later pile beside the mouse-scented scarf and the soup sock. Maybe you'll salvage them. Maybe you'll feed them to the stove as an offering. Here's the thing no one tells you about mildew. It's not just a smell. It's a presence. Once it's in the house, it seeps into the fabric of your life, literally and otherwise. You'll start to sniff everything like a bloodhound, even when you're not near the laundry. A chair cushion, a bedsheet, a child's collar. You'll catch yourself mid-conversation pausing because you swear something smells off. You'll become paranoid, and you'll be right. Historically, mildew was a full-blown enemy in homes like yours, where ventilation was a joke, insulation was wet wood and prayer, and the only dryer you had was a stove fueled by splintered furniture if things got desperate enough. Women would sprinkle salt on damp linens, or vinegar, or even rub them with crushed charcoal before laying them in sunlight, when there was sunlight. But in winter, it was more like a game of Russian roulette with your linen closet. You rotate a few pieces on the line, checking for damp spots. One skirt feels clammy. A towel near the floor has gone cold and sour. You toss it aside and whisper your apologies to whatever poor soul was hoping for a clean bath this week. Not today. The children are back at it, racing between the kitchen and front room, dragging in slush, tripping over clothespins, inventing games with socks as projectiles. You holler once, twice. By the third time your voice is hoarse and they finally scatter, leaving behind a trail of wet footprints and a broken drying rack arm that you now have to prop with a broom handle. You look at it. You look at the broom. You decide not to scream. Instead, you slap a frozen petticoat back onto the rack and carry on. Because the real threat isn't the children. It's the creep. Mildew creep. It starts with one towel, then a petticoat, then a set of sheets. One by one, you sniff and prod your way through the room like a laundress turned surgeon. You find 3 more mildly suspicious pieces, all cold and a little too squishy. They go into the emergency boil pile. A pillowcase, hand-embroidered naturally, shows its first blotch of grey-green near the seam. You panic scrub it with vinegar and salt, muttering every cleansing spell your grandmother ever whispered under her breath. Meanwhile, the fire hisses like it's judging you. You throw in a log, fan the flames, and rotate your drying hierarchy again. Shirts get demoted to chairs, towels elevated to ceiling lines, socks stuffed into tin cans and set near the hearth like they're baking. This is no longer about cleanliness. It's defense. An open debate still simmers in academic circles about whether mildew is the leading cause of seasonal laundry disasters or simply a symptom of a larger ventilation problem. You think it's both, but right now you don't care. All you know is that if one more item smells like soggy bread, you will walk out into the snow and let the wolves take you. You press the last petticoat near the fire, its hem still weeping, and try not to cry with it. Your hands are shaking from effort, or rage, or fatigue. Maybe all three. The children are singing a nonsense song in the back room. You envy their joy. The final towel dries, fully, blessedly, without incident. You touch it reverently, fold it, hold it to your face. It smells, miracle of miracles, like nothing. That's the goal now. Not lavender, not fresh air, not flowers or sunshine, just nothing. No mildew, no mould, no sour soap rot. Clean isn't a smell anymore. It's an absence. You stack the towel with the others and sit down hard. The fire crackles, the snow howls. The house temporarily is still. You survive the mildew, for today. The next morning you wake to the sound of something that almost makes you laugh. Quiet. No wind rattling the shutters. No drip drip of melting snow through a cracked ceiling board. No children hollering about missing mittens or arguing over who gets the bigger biscuit. Just silence. Peaceful, eerie humming. You sit up slowly, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of pine smoke and exhaustion, and scan the room. The fire's burned low but hasn't gone out. Another small victory. A thin wisp of sun is filtering through the fogged window, casting golden streaks across a landscape of half-dried clothes and sleep-creased faces. Two of the children are curled under the kitchen table like cats. Another one is asleep in a chair, limbs splayed in all directions like they fell mid-tumble and decided to give up. And then you remember, you have one more job, the new laundry invention. It's been sitting in the corner for a week now, still partially wrapped in its delivery burlap. A gift from your cousin who swore, that it would cut wash time in half, which sounds about as realistic as flying pigs or indoor plumbing. But the letter was so enthusiastic, and she's always had more optimism than sense, so you gave it a shot. Or meant to, but the snow hit, the laundry exploded, the mildew almost declared independence. Today, though, with the storm calmed and a strange stillness in the air, you finally drag it out. You unravel the wrappings and stare down at it, a crank-powered washing drum. You're sceptical, naturally. It's made of metal and wood, half rusted already, with a big hand crank on one side and a small spout on the other. It looks like someone mated a butter churn with a grain silo and then gave it wheels just for spite. It has exactly the kind of personality you distrust in a tool, confident, but probably full of hidden maintenance. Still, you're too sore to keep scrubbing by hand. Your wrists have been aching for days. So against your better judgment, you fill it with warm water, add a sliver of lye soap and toss in a handful of socks. You seal the lid, brace your shoulder against the wall and begin cranking. Immediately you regret everything. The handle sticks. The gears grind. The whole contraption jerks like it's got opinions. You crank harder, thinking maybe it just needs to warm up, but the thing lurches forward an inch and almost takes your arm with it. You adjust your grip, mutter a few colourful words that words that your children are absolutely going to repeat later, and try again. It starts to move, clunk, squeak, splash, turning in a halting rhythm that makes you question whether this is actually easier or just newly painful in different places. The socks slosh inside like trapped fish. The machine rattles across the floor as you crank, sending vibrations up your arm and straight into your spine. After 5 minutes, you open the lid. The socks look the same. Still grey, still sad, still judging you. You crank again, and finally you start to see some suds and flecks of dirt rising. Progress. Small, soapy, begrudging progress. You drain the dirty water through the little spout into a bucket, then refill the drum with fresh rinse water, crank again, and repeat. It's not miraculous. It's not even really efficient. But it does keep your hands out of the water, and that alone feels like a luxury. The cracks in your fingers sigh in relief. You're not ready to sing its praises just yet, but you admit, maybe, your cousin wasn't entirely delusional. And here's a weird fact from the fringes of history. Early washing machines were so untrustworthy, some women would pre-wash their laundry by hand before putting them in the machine, just to make sure it wasn't completely useless, which kind of defeats the purpose. One woman in Ohio wrote in her diary that her machine made more noise than difference. You feel that in your soul. You keep experimenting, short sleeves under things as a towel, and slowly find your rhythm. Crank, drain, rinse, crank. The handle loosens up. The bucket doesn't leak. You start to hum just a little. For the first time in what feels like weeks, your hands are dry while your laundry gets wet. A miracle in the form of metal and bad engineering. The kids wake up one by one and, sensing your rare semi-calm mood, don't immediately start fighting. Instead, they gather around the machine, fascinated by the noise and motion. The youngest wants to turn the crank and you let her. She's too weak to do any real damage, but she looks proud anyway. You think maybe this is what hope feels like. Now, don't get too excited. The machine can't handle anything heavy. You throw in a small apron and it nearly tips forward under the weight. The sound it makes trying to churn through a petticoat is unholy. But for the light stuff, it'll do. And that's when your neighbour walks in, stamping snow from her boots, cheeks flushed from the cold. "What in God's name is that?" she says, eyeing the drum like it's about to explode. "Progress," you say, deadpan. She cackles. "Looks like a milk churn had a nervous breakdown," you shrug. "It's doing laundry, and I'm not." That shuts her up. She watches it churn, squints at the flecks of soap in the water, then nods once. "I'll bring my smalls over later." And just like that, the crank drum becomes your kitchen's new centerpiece. Not a saviour. Not even a good solution. But different. And sometimes, different is enough. You finish the last crank, pull the socks free, and marvel at how they're, well, not clean, but less dirty. You hang them near the fire with hands that aren't burning, and you let yourself lean back into the chair for a second longer than you should. The snow still falls, but slower now, softer. The laundry still waits, but for today, just for today, it waits on your terms. The snow lets up the next morning like it finally got tired of itself, just stops mid-flurry as if remembering it left the stove burning back home. The sun peeks out like it's testing the mood of the room, and the sky turns that pale winter blue that tricks you into thinking it's warm until you open the door and feel your soul try to evacuate through your teeth. But it's dry, blessedly, gloriously dry. And that means it's time to brave the washline wars. You eye the back door like it's a trap, and in a way, it is. You know what waits out there. The frozen battleground where yesterday's half-dry garments, today's new batch, and every wind gust from hell will conspire to turn your afternoon into a slapstick tragedy. But you also know you're out of room inside. The chairs, the line, the ceiling rack, the broom handle propped against the curtain rod, they're all sagging under the weight of damp fabric. The only space left is outside, so you layer up. 2 skirts, woolen shawl, mittens so stiff they feel like oven mitts dipped in wax, and boots, if you can call them that, more like stitched leather excuses wrapped in hope. You gather your dryable garments into a basket, pin bags slung over your shoulder, and kick the door open like you're storming a castle. The wind hits you first, not hard but cold enough to make your teeth regret their decision to exist. The snow has crusted over in parts, uneven and deceptive, and you do that awkward half-crunch, half-slide walk to the line, muttering threats to anyone who's ever called winter cosy. The clothesline sags under yesterday's offerings, now frozen in strange, expressive shapes. A pair of trousers is bent mid-step like it's trying to escape. A chemise is twisted into some kind of ghostly swirl. One undershirt appears to be pointing at something ominously. You pull them down gently, one by one, stacking them carefully into the basket to bring inside for thawing. Then it's time to hang the fresh batch. Here's where the war begins. The wind has opinions, strong ones. It yanks a sock from your hand mid-pinned and sends it flying across the yard like a tiny white bird with no purpose. You give chase, slipping on the packed snow, nearly going down face first into a drift. You catch the sock and hold it like a prize. The sock does not thank you. Back at the line, you double pin everything. Sometimes triple pin, you don't trust the breeze. You've seen what it can do, how it once picked up a freshly washed flannel and tossed it into the neighbour's pig pen. You had to explain to 2 different people why your husband's drawers ended up wrapped around a fence post. Let's pause for a strange but true fringe fact. In certain parts of the 1800s American frontier, it was considered mildly scandalous for a woman to hang underthings on the front-facing line, even clean ones. You had to hide them behind sheets or keep them low, like they were some kind of moral hazard. Bloomers, it seems, had more social power than people gave them credit for. So today you hang the bloomers low, more out of habit than modesty. There's no one around but your own brood, and they've seen worse. You alternate light and heavy garments, balancing the line, adjusting for weight, trying to keep it from collapsing entirely. The rope creaks, the wind hums, the pins bite your fingers. Then it happens. A gust, sharp, sudden, dramatic. The whole line snaps sideways. A shirt whips you in the face with the force of a wet trout. A petticoat lifts like it's trying to become airborne. You duck, clothes flap. The basket flips, pins scatter like dry beans across the snow. You stand there blinking, hair full of frozen lint, considering your life choices. You could scream, you could cry, but instead, you laugh. A sharp, breathless, slightly unhinged laugh that startles a bird out of the nearby tree. Because of course this is happening. It's laundry day after all, and laundry day always fights back. You gather the pins, jam your knee into the basket to keep it grounded, and start over. Slower this time. More strategic. You anchor the heaviest items at the ends, pin through sleeves instead of hems, make tiny folds to catch the breeze less aggressively. You whisper threats to the wind. It seems to listen. This is the part of wash day no one really talks about. The tactical phase. It's not just about getting things clean, it's about logistics, engineering, weight distribution. You could run a shipping dock with the skills you've developed stringing up bloomers in 20-mile-per-hour winds. You check the sky, still clear. You check your skirt, damp again from the earlier sock chase. You decide to ignore it. One shirt refuses to stay pinned. You wrestle it into submission. Another sock flaps with a worrying intensity. You pin it 3 times and dare it to try anything. Finally, everything is up. You step back and look at your work. A full line, fluttering softly in the wind, like flags marking some kind of victory. Not clean, not dry yet, but out there, under the sky. Breathing air that doesn't smell like soap or mildew. There's a theory some historians float that laundry lines were a symbol of domestic territory. That hanging clothes outside was a public claim. I run this household, I keep it clean, I keep it moving. It wasn't just labour, it was quiet defiance, an act of presence. You never thought of it like that before. But now, watching your line wave gently in the breeze like a tired, dignified banner, you feel it. The pride, the exhaustion, the quiet power of saying I did this. Again. You pick up the empty basket, shake the snow from the edge, and carry it back toward the house. The wind doesn't fight you this time, it just sighs, and back inside, the fire welcomes you with its familiar hiss. The children are still half-dressed, pretending their stockings are hand puppets. You say nothing, you sit down, you exhale, and then you wait. Because in a few hours, the real game begins again, bringing it all back in before the wind changes its mind. It starts with a tickle in your throat. Not a full cough, not quite, but just enough to let you know that your lungs have had enough of breathing in damp socks, vinegar steam, and second-hand mildew for days on end. You ignore it, mostly because there's no time to acknowledge illness, and partly because you're already too deep in the laundry abyss to climb out. Your hands are blistered, your back aches like it's made of wet rope, and your knees sound like gunfire every time you crouch. So sure, body, go ahead and add coughing to the list. You sit by the stove, wrapped in the same damp shawl you've been living in for 3 days, watching the outdoor line sway. The clothes are still there, miraculously. You half expected the wind to return overnight and redecorate the nearby trees with drawers and chemises, but they're holding. Some of them have even started to dry, a beautiful, ridiculous miracle in this bleakest of seasons. You sip tea, or what's pretending to be tea. It's warm water steeped with half a leaf and a wish, but it soothes your throat enough to keep you upright. You glance at your fingers. The knuckles are cracked and red, the nails rimmed with grime from wood ash, soap and laundry water that could probably be bottled and sold as a historical hazard. You flex your hands. They don't like that. You flex them anyway, because there's still more to do. You gather a basket, freshly mended, because of course one of the handles snapped yesterday during the Great Sock Chase, and prepare for the final phase of this cursed winter ritual. Retrieval. The sun is out, but you're weak. Pale, ghostly, and absolutely not warming anything. Still, it's enough to dry a shirt halfway, maybe even a petticoat, so you step outside face to the sky and take a long breath. Cold. So cold, but crisp. Better than the sour rot of indoor humidity. You walk toward the line, basket in hand, and begin the process of unpinning, folding and stacking. This should be simple. It isn't. Half the shirts have developed weird folds where the wind froze them mid-flap. The bloomers are dry in patches and soaking in others, like they were caught between two weather systems. One towel has iced to the line itself and needs to be peeled off like a sticker from a frozen window. The pins, those traitorous little things, snap easily now. The wood's too brittle from the cold. You drop the shards into your apron pocket and make a mental note to carve more, eventually. There's a piece of folklore you once heard from your grandmother, that if your clothes freeze on the line and then dry while frozen, they'll keep you warmer when you wear them. Something about locking in the heat. Total nonsense, of course. But as you fold a petticoat stiff with ice crystals, you whisper a half-joke, "Lock it in then." You look ridiculous. Hair stuck in a braid that's more knot than plait. Scarf wrapped like a noose. Nose red, eyes watering from the cold. Holding a basket of stiff garments with the grace of a vulture carrying roadkill. But you feel accomplished. Maybe not proud, but there's satisfaction in this kind of fatigue. The kind that comes from doing something absurdly hard, knowing no one will notice and doing it anyway. You glance across the line and spot the shirt. His shirt. Your husband's Sunday best, which was unfortunately in the wrong pile when the starch bucket tipped over and soaked the sleeve. You unpin it. Already bracing yourself. The starch has worked its magic. The shirt is too stiff now. You fold it and it holds shape like a tent flap. You snort. There's no way he'll get an arm through that without dislocating something. Still, you add it to the pile. Maybe you'll steam it later. Or pretend it shrank and needs mending. The children burst out the door behind you, all noise and flailing limbs. One runs barefoot into the snow. Another follows, waving a half-dry towel like a victory banner. You shout a warning that will be ignored. Then you go back to folding. Halfway through the retrieval, your chest begins to ache. Not sharply, just enough to make breathing feel like work. You ignore that too, it's laundry day. Breathing is optional, clean drawers are not. There's an old wives' tale you used to hear whispered around kitchen tables, how some women would catch death on wash day. Pneumonia mostly, or something that started as a chill and turned into a burial by the end of the week. You used to scoff at that. Now, you get it. Entirely. One too many days standing in slush, bent over boiling pots, breathing steam and sorrow, it wears you thin. Transparent even. Like a well-used rag. You bring the basket inside, muscles aching. The fire is still going, that's something. You set the clothes near the hearth, letting the residual warmth chase off the chill and sink into the nearest chair. One of the children appears with a red face and snow in their boots. "I brought in the socks," they say proudly. You nod, unable to muster a proper response. They beam anyway. You manage to peel off your boots, unwrap your shawl and settle in beside the stove. You press your hands to the warm iron, letting the sting fade from your fingers. Another child places a cup of something hot beside you. Tea, real this time or close enough? As the clothes dry further near the heat, the kitchen starts to smell like soap again. Not fresh soap, not floral. Just clean, and that in this house is a scent rarer than gold. You close your eyes for a moment. Not sleep, just quiet. But then someone coughs. Not you this time. You open one eye and glance toward the sound. One of the kids, flushed cheeks, nose shiny. You sigh. Laundry might be finished. But sickness? Sickness is just getting started. It doesn't take long for the house to go full plague ward. It starts with that one child, just a cough and a shine to the nose, easy to ignore. But then there's a fever. Then two. Then someone throws up in a bucket meant for wringing towels, and suddenly the entire laundry schedule has been shoved off the table like a porcelain dish, replaced with flannel rags, boiled blankets, and the distinctive, sickly sweet smell of onion poultices and dread. You'd planned to spend the day ironing and folding, finally putting the last of the week's wash into chests and drawers, maybe even sitting still long enough to mend the hole in your right sock before it swallows your toe whole. Instead, you're now doctor, nurse, maid, and laundry triage captain, in a household where every surface is covered in some combination of fluids and flannel, and the worst part? Sick laundry. Sick laundry is a beast all its own. It doesn't just need cleaning, it needs purging. It carries the weight of illness, the stink of sweat and fever, and the faint sour tang of fear. There's a gravity to it, a knowledge that whatever touched the skin of someone burning up with chills has to be dealt with differently. No gentle soaking, no light starch. It's all boiling pots, soap like acid, and prayers muttered while wringing out sheets so drenched in fever sweat they could probably walk away on their own. You begin with the pillowcases. They're the worst. Stained with drool and worse, they reek with that unmistakable scent of a high fever. Something between vinegar and cooked meat. You boil water, again, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling like a signal of surrender. There's a debate, has been for years, about whether washing sickbed linens in boiling water actually kills illness. Some midwives say yes, insist on lye soap and near scalding temperatures. Others argue it's superstition, that the sickness is already in the air in the body and you're just playing make-believe with hot water. You don't care either way. It feels like protection, so you do it. The boiling is less about germs and more about control, about doing something. The linens bubble and churn like cursed pasta. You use the long stirring stick, once meant for soup, now retired to laundry, and prod them down. The fabric twists in the pot, curling like it's trying to escape. You let it boil a few minutes longer than necessary, just to be sure. One of the children moans from the cot you dragged into the kitchen last night, the warmest room in the house. You cross over, wipe their forehead with a rag you just dipped in mint water, and tuck the blanket tighter around them. Their skin is so hot it steams in the cold air. There's an old belief that sick linens should be hung only at night, where the moon's cold eye can draw out the sickness without burning it in. You've no time for that. You hang them when they're clean, when they're dry, when they're needed, moon or not. The first set dries near the stove, stiff and ghost white. You switch them out for the next batch, blankets this time. These are heavier, sodden with sweat, and not the kind that fades. You drag them to the pot like corpses. This is no longer laundry, this is purification. Here's a truly bizarre fringe fact. In the 1800s, some women believed burying sick-bed laundry for a night in the snow before washing would draw out the illness. A kind of frozen detox. You briefly consider it. The snow's still deep, the ground's quiet, but the idea of dragging fever-soaked blankets out and laying them in the yard like sacrificial offerings feels a little too bleak. Even for you. You scrub instead. You wring, you boil. The air in the kitchen turns to soup again. Thick, damp, stinging your eyes. The fire hisses beneath the pot like it's tired of you too. But it holds, it always does. The children shuffle in and out of fever dreams, some moaning, some sleeping. One is sick on the floor beside the hearth. You clean it up without flinching, drop the rag in the lye bucket, and keep moving. There's a rhythm to sickbed laundry, a beat that feels ancient. Wash, rinse, wring, hang. Check the child, start again. You lose track of time. The light shifts across the fogged windows. The tea goes cold. Your own head starts to pulse in a dull, rhythmic throb behind your eyes, but you pretend not to notice. The bedding you washed just last night? Soiled again by morning, and again by noon. It's endless. There's no winning, only maintenance. You start to realise laundry in its most brutal form is a form of holding the line, keeping chaos just barely at bay, one scalded sheet at a time. The neighbour knocks mid-afternoon, scarf pulled up to her eyes. She leaves a jar of elderberry syrup on the step and backs away like, "You're contagious through the wood." You don't blame her. She knows the signs. She's had her own house of fever ghosts before. You raise the jar in thanks, shut the door with your elbow, and pour a spoonful into each child's mouth with practiced calm. Even the half-asleep one swallows without complaint. The cough comes back in the evening. Yours, this time. It's sharper now, more insistent. It hitches in your chest like a splinter caught between ribs. You lean against the stove, feeling it radiate through your spine, and close your eyes. You'll rest soon. Maybe. After the last batch is dry, after the floor is mopped again, after you check every forehead, every pulse, every soggy rag. You're not a nurse. Not a doctor. But in this house, in this storm, during this long, slow siege of winter, you're the only line of defence. And your weapon is laundry. The fever breaks sometime around dawn, or maybe it's just your mind that breaks first. It's hard to tell. You're hunched over the stove watching a pot of washwater bubble, with a single sad flannel shirt drifting in circles like it's trying to escape this mortal coil, when you notice the kitchen is finally blessedly quiet. Not the eerie quiet of illness either. This one's different. It's softer, lighter, a silence that holds peace instead of tension. You glance toward the makeshift sickbed by the hearth, half expecting another moan, a cough, a cry for water, but no, just the rhythmic breathing of children in real sleep. not that feverish, fitful kind. One of them shifts under a blanket and sighs, the kind of sigh that only comes when a body starts to heal. You almost dare to believe it. You straighten slowly, back screaming in protest. Every muscle in your body feels like it's been replaced with a brick. You move like a broken marionette across the room, kneeling by your eldest to touch their cheek. Cool, still all flushed but not burning. You try another forehead, then another. They're coming back, all of them. And that's when you realise you might finally be allowed to fall apart. You sit down hard on the floor and laugh, not a big laugh, not the kind of anyone hears, just one of those quiet, wheezing, half-hysterical chuckles that bubbles up when you've spent 6 straight days elbow deep in human fluids and boiling linens. And suddenly, you're not entirely sure what to do with your hands. The washwater burps behind you. The shirt flips. You turn it over with a spoon like it's soup. It's cleaner now, still stained sure, but who isn't? You dump the water, refill, and throw in another rag from the pile. By now, the motions are so second nature you could probably do them in your sleep, and maybe you have. You should rest. You need to rest. But instead you clean. You always do. It's how you regain control. When the body fails, when the fever takes over, when the coughing won't stop and the children can't open their eyes, the one thing you can always do is clean. Laundry isn't just laundry, it's ritual. It's armour. There's a theory from some modern historian, some well-fed man with soft hands, no doubt, that domestic work in times of crisis was a kind of practical prayer, that every scrubbed sheet and folded towel was a plea for mercy in a language older than words. You used to scoff at that. Now, you understand it too well. You open the back door to toss the grey water. The snow has hardened into a crust, smooth and shimmering under the early light. The cold slaps you, but you welcome it. It's real. It's not fever or steam or the damp rot of mildew. It's clean. For a moment you stand there, breathing it in, watching your breath curl up into the morning like smoke. Then you notice the pile. Half-dry laundry abandoned days ago during the worst of it, now frozen stiff in a pathetic pile by the chopping stump. A skirt half-curled, a towel bent into a shape not found in nature. You forgot about them entirely. Your first impulse is rage, pure, useless rage. How dare they exist? How dare the world demand more of you? But it passes quickly, replaced with resignation. You gather the pieces into your arms, brittle and sharp, like lifting frozen paper. Some are ruined. You know that already. The creases are too deep, the fibres too cracked. But some might be saved. You carry them inside anyway. The fire is still going, barely, but enough. You stack the frozen things by the hearth and sit again. You peel off your gloves, your fingers are cracked. One of your nails split down the middle. You're not sure when that happened. You flex your hands, the skin pulls, then you lean back against the wall and close your eyes. You don't sleep. Not really. But your brain lets go for just long enough that when you open your eyes again, the fire is lower. The children are stirring and the frost has begun to melt from the petticoat on the rack. Your youngest sits up first, blinking like a bear out of hibernation. Is it over? They croak. You nod, unsure whether they mean the sickness or the snow or the war that laundry has waged against your soul. For now, you say. They lay back down, satisfied. You feed the fire, hang the thawing pieces one by one, check on the sick rags soaking in a basin, stir them, rinse, wring, and just when you think the day might return to a normal rhythm, your husband stumbles in from the shed with his coat pulled tight and a sheepish look on his face. He holds up his Sunday shirt. You know the one. The starch-broken, overpressed, sleeve-too-short monstrosity that you nearly set on fire last week. It's ruined, he says flatly. You blink. Is it? He holds it up. The collar could cut glass. The sleeves could double as cardboard tubes. It makes a sound when he moves it, like dry leaves being crumpled inside a barrel. You nod solemnly. Guess it is, you say. There's a beat of silence, then he shrugs and hangs it on the hook by the door like it's still usable. You don't argue. Let him try to wear it next Sunday. You'll light a candle. You turn back to the basin, breathing through your teeth as you plunge your hands into cold rinse water again. Not because you want to, not because you just should, but because someone just coughed into the last clean towel, and if you don't start another load now, you'll be scraping together rags by nightfall. You keep going, you always do, and outside the snow keeps falling, but somehow it's not as heavy now. You're starting to lose track of what day it is not in a dreamy romantic way like the poets say, more in the, is this the same shirt I washed 3 times already? or just its evil twin kind of way. The laundry cycle has become something less like a rhythm and more like a time loop. Wash, wring, hang, sniff, rewash. Repeat until death, or spring, whichever comes first. The good news, no one's actively sick today. Not coughing, not sweating through the sheets, not staring at you with glassy eyes like ghosts in small wool sweaters. That alone is enough to put a little air back into your lungs. You've traded fever dreams for real sleep. Only a few hours, but solid enough to remember your name again. And that counts for something. The fire's still burning, the stove's still hissing, and in your little laundry-ruled kingdom, the routine grinds on. Today's focus, recovery washing. This is the part where you go back and deal with the things you ignored when all hell broke loose. The "we'll get to that later" pile. The "I'm pretending this isn't full of vomit" basket. The linen so pungent and so tangled with illness that even the mildew won't go near them. Now that the house isn't coughing on you, it's time to deep clean what's left behind. First up, bedding. You sort through it like a battlefield medic, triaging pillowcases, sheets, and one particularly offensive quilt that smells like defeat. You boil a fresh pot of water, this time with a few drops of rosemary and mint you'd stashed in a jar months ago. Because if you're going to scrub bodily horror out of cotton, you might as well pretend you're doing it in a spa. You plunge a pillowcase into the water, stirring it like a stew, watching the suds bloom with something almost resembling purpose. Your hands are so raw at this point you wrap them in old rags just to get through it. Laundry gloves? A luxury you read about once in a pamphlet written by someone who's clearly never wrung out sheets in February. As the linens boil and rinse and boil again, you start reassembling the home from beneath the pile. Chairs reclaimed, floor space rediscovered, towels folded and not immediately reused. For the first time in weeks, the house smells more like clean steam and less like damp regret. And then it happens, the miracle. You step outside and the snow isn't falling. Not only that, it's melting. Just a little. Just enough to make the icicles weep and the porch boards groan. But still. You hear drip, drip, drip off the eaves and swear it's the most beautiful sound in the world. Water leaving, going away. Not multiplying on your floors or soaking into your socks or finding its way into the underarms of a starch-heavy shirt. You drag a basket of semi-dry wash out to the line, lifting each piece into the sun like it's a resurrection. And it feels like one, doesn't it? Every petticoat caught in the breeze, every sleeve flapping like a flag of stubborn survival. The air's still sharp but not cruel. You can move without your nose going numb. You even hang the quilt. The beast. The one you thought you might have to bury in the garden. It flaps against the wind like it forgives you. You pat it fondly and step back. Historical fact. If you need a little grounding in your reverie, there were women who would mark the first clear winter drying day on their calendars. Not because it was quaint, but because it was vital. Clean-aired linens meant lowered risk of disease. It meant a house that didn't choke on its own damp. You weren't just washing clothes, you were warding off death, mildew, and scandal in equal measure. Of course, there's still an argument among scholars about how much laundry women in the 1800s actually did. Weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, with layers just aired between wearings. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. A mix of schedule, survival, and sheer capacity. You do laundry when the house starts to smell like armpit and sadness, which is to say constantly. Back inside, the children are finally wearing clothes you didn't pull straight off the line while still wet. They're moving with energy again, eating, chasing, laughing. You even catch one of them folding napkins. Badly, yes, but voluntarily. You want to cry a little. You take inventory of the damage. Shirts, mostly intact, a few with lopsided starch scars. Acceptable losses. Socks, one gone forever. Probably eaten by the stove. Towels, soft again. For now. Linens, less haunted. Your hands, a war zone. But you expected that. You run warm water over them slowly, and rub in a little grease you begged off the neighbour weeks ago. It stings, sure, but it's better than nothing. You flex your fingers, still working, still yours. Then there's a knock. You brace. You always brace. Nothing good comes from unexpected visits in laundry season. But this time it's your cousin, the one who sent the crank-powered contraption. She barges in, trailing cold air and a wool scarf, holding a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "I brought the twin," she says cheerfully, dumping it on your table. You stare at the shape. It's another machine. This one even more elaborate. 2 cranks, a lid with a latch, a drum so large you could bathe a goat in it. "Are you trying to kill me?" you ask, only half joking. She laughs. No, just thought you could use some help. You consider this, then you smile, the first real one in a while. Fine, you say, Ishita, but if this one eats a towel, it's yours. Together you set it near the stove, you might even give it a name. Later that night you fall asleep beside a basket of folded sheets, the room warm, the air dry, and the scent of mint still lingering faintly on the edges of the fabric. You made it, and somehow you're ready to do it all again. Just not tomorrow. You wake to sunlight. Actual, undeniable sunlight. Not that weak grey blur that pretends to be daylight all winter long, but real beams pouring through the windows like someone's opened a door in the sky. It hits your eyelids, slips across your quilt, and warms the floorboards in streaks. You blink into it, dazed, wondering for a second if you've died and been reborn in a season that knows mercy. You haven't. You're still surrounded by the trappings of post-plague recovery. A folded pile of flannels that still smell faintly of vinegar, a mop propped in the corner like a warning, and a laundry basket that you swear was empty last night and now somehow holds 3 more items. But there's something different today. Not the laundry, that's never different. It's you. The fever season passed through your home like a storm and, incredibly, didn't take anyone with it. You're bruised, sure. Raw in every sense. Your hands look like they belong to a coal miner who lost a fight with a badger. You haven't sat through an entire meal without being interrupted by a spill, a cough, or a sock emergency in weeks. But you're standing, breathing, eyeballing a clean floor and a mostly dry towel with a flicker of something that might even be pride. Today, you decide, is going to be a gentler laundry day. Not soft. Laundry doesn't allow softness, but something close to forgiveness. You start with the baby clothes, small, manageable, the kind of thing you can wash in a single basin without needing to boil half a forest's worth of firewood. You lower them into a warm soap bath like they are being baptized into this new post-sickness world. Cotton, flannel, one piece of lace-trimmed linen that you vaguely recall borrowing from your cousin's trunk and never returning. You hum as you swish them around, something tuneless and tired, but melodic all the same. The children stir one by one, dragging themselves into the kitchen with bed-mussed hair and red cheeks, blinking against the light. One of them sniffs the air and says with awe, "It smells nice." You glance around. There's still a faint edge of lye, of old starch, of wool that's been wet too many times. But there's something else now, scent, sunlight, bread maybe, because someone had the sense to stoke the stove and start breakfast. But yeah, nice isn't wrong. The baby clothes dry fast. You hang them near the stove and watch them sway light as handkerchiefs, catching the warm air and dancing in a way no skirt ever could. You sit back for a moment and watch them. This is how it should be. This is what laundry was supposed to feel like before winter, and mildew and stomach flus and sock avalanches tried to ruin your life. Laundry as maintenance, laundry as rhythm, not laundry as full contact sport. You grab the next batch, underthings. Ah yes, the humble, humbling foundation of every family. Bloomers with hems in need of mending, long johns that have seen better centuries, stockings with holes so strategic you wonder if they're still legally stockings. You sort them carefully, separating the ones that can be salvaged from the ones that are destined for rag duty. Quick fringe fact for your entertainment. In the mid-1800s, some households reused old underclothes as tea strainers. Not clean ones, retired ones. You gag a little at the thought and silently promise your future tea that it'll never know such horror. You get to work hands submerged in warm, soapy water, scrubbing with care instead of vengeance. No boiling today, no panicked stain removal, just the quiet satisfaction of clean fabric and the return of control. The neighbour knocks again mid-morning. She's brought clothespins, bless her heart. Hand-carved, notched in the way her grandmother taught her, with the kind of detail that makes you wonder if she's hiding some kind of woodworking empire under her root cellar. You thank her. She stays for tea. You both sit by the fire and fold towels in a silence that says everything. We made it. You ask about her own washing. She sighs, sips, and gestures to the weather. Hanging today, she says, even if it's just symbolic. Symbolic laundry. You love that. Outside, you step into the brightness and feel the sun touch your skin. It's still cold, of course. This is February, not fantasy. But the edge is gone. The line out back stretches stiff with yesterday's drying, and you can already see which pieces are ready to come in. You go to them gently this time. No wrestling. No unpinning with numb fingers or watching trousers flap into the wind like disgruntled ghosts. Just soft tugging, folding, collecting what's dry and letting the rest have another hour in the light. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the glass of the kitchen window. Hair tied up, apron damp at the hem, sleeves rolled, arms full of clothes. And you realise you don't look tired anymore. Not just tired anyway. You look like someone who did something impossible and came out with a little bit of herself still intact. You carry the dry laundry inside and lay it out on the table. Your children crowd around, not with dread this time, but with curiosity. You hand them pieces to fold. They pretend to argue, but you see the quiet pride behind it. They know what this means. They were part of it too. You press one of the smaller shirts against your chest and smile. Clean. Not just washed, not just dried, but clean. You stoke the fire, rinse the basin, wrap your fingers around a warm mug and sit for a long, long minute. There will be more laundry. Of course there will. The snow will melt, turn to mud, and the entire world will need washing again. But not today. Today you breathe, you stretch, you rest your hand on a pile of soft, sun-dried cloth and whisper to no one in particular. We did it. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but we did it. And that, in this house, in this century, in this long and bitter winter, is the only measure of success that matters. So here you are, 30 days, thousands of wrung-out garments, at least 3 laundry-related injuries, 1 mildew uprising, and 1 crank-powered disaster machine later. And you've lived to tell the tale. Barely. Your knuckles might still be swollen, your favourite apron may now be starched into a shape that defies physics, and your dignity probably slipped off the washline somewhere around week 2. But let's be honest, you've earned every blister. The storm has passed. The windows are no longer fogged with boiling rinse water or sorrow. The centre in the kitchen has shifted from moulded despair to something like warm cloth and wood smoke. The stove hums low, like it finally believes you won't abuse it again today. And the laundry? Oh, it's still there. It always will be, but now it's folded, neatly, gloriously, mostly not damp. The house hums with a strange new rhythm. The children, freshly scrubbed and layered in socks that actually match, pad through the rooms like survivors of a very small, very domestic war. They still make messes, of course they do, but something's shifted. You've all seen the inside of the storm and you've come out wiser. Maybe a little warped, sure, but wiser. And you? You've discovered a strange truth along the way. That laundry in winter isn't just about cleanliness, it's about resilience, stubbornness, laughing in the face of 3-day-old gravy stains and saying, "Not today, Satan." It's about coaxing life back into fabric and family and yourself, one boiling pot at a time. You know now that there will always be another storm, another petticoat, another fever, another sock that disappears, only to return when the snow melts with something suspicious in the heel. But you also know this. You're capable of more than you ever imagined. So tonight, as the wind dies down and the moon peers in through a window unclouded by mildew or lint, you lie back on a pillow, wrapped in a case you scalded, scrubbed, dried, and folded with your own wrecked hands. You stretch your toes under a sheet that's warm from the fire and actually smells like soap. And you smile because you know tomorrow will come with its wet boots and soiled sleeves. But you're ready. You've got this. You always have.